on a single income.
Yep.
And stuff like that. Yeah.
And that's why it got less good. It got less good.
That was kind of the thesis of the thread.
Yeah.
That's among the reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the sure.
All right.
King of the Hill.
Before we
Always
start, I was going to put this in news, and I was also going to bring it up on the show, but I don't think there's any place for it. Ring Fit Adventure is currently on sale for 13% off, which makes it $69.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nintendo will remember that.
No, they won't.
They're gonna patch it out like they patched out Minecraft Steve's dick.
Sad.
That's not really how that went, but
That's what happened. His dick was in the game. They're like, we gotta remove that. All right. Hello and welcome to episode 145 of the Gaming Fix podcast on this Halloween, October 31st, 2020. I am your very spooky host, Andre Cole, aka your partner's favorite ghoul. I'm joined today by Pat.
I have a favorite ghoul now.
Is it Andre?
No, it's the ghoul from Amnesia Rebirth,
Oh.
which is
Alex.
it's a cool ghoul.
I am your partner's favorite gourd.
Okay,
That's probably a butternut
pumpkin.
squash.
Yeah.
There's that pumpkin butt. Allison. No, I'm not saying Allison has a pumpkin butt. Like there was the picture of the guy with the pumpkin butt, the pumpkin head, like climbing over a fence. Did y'all see that?
No.
No,
No, I didn't.
I have no idea what that means.
Is that like this the suit? The guy, the person in the suit that does the dance?
No.
Okay.
No, this was like a person in like a pumpkin patch in like jeans, but their ass was like two pumpkins. I don't know.
So that's Allison.
That's not my ass. So sorry. My favorite ghoul is the special Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. I don't know if you've even seen that, but that was a big childhood favorite. So
we can get through the intros, and then I want to go back to that for just a second.
And our last member joining us all the way from spooky Transylvania, Jeff Davis.
I have such sights to show you.
Oh, that's the spookiest.
My favorite ghoul. I always preferred being a ghoul to a Malkavian rather than a Ventru.
That's good. Yeah, very good. Good. I'm gonna replay that one. Well, I shouldn't say that game but I want to replay Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines soon.
Even though the sequel got delayed.
Yeah, not even because of the sequel, just because I actually am. My expectations of the sequel are kind of low. I hope that they are blown away, but I'm not setting my hopes too high. I think Bloodlines is probably one of the best games ever made. So
yeah, it's really good.
On the list, like top 20 probably somewhere in there. So I would just like to play it again because it's one of my faves.
Pat, you shared this pumpkin dance video, and I had somehow allowed my mind to just let this seep out, and I thought it was gone.
No, it never goes. It's best. It's one of the best things about the Halloween season is that you can watch the pumpkin dance.
Yeah. If you want another Halloween-y kind of music-y video, I recommend Vampira by Devin Townsend.
Sure.
Yes.
It's also really good.
It's good.
Trying to find this pumpkin ass, but
so
go ahead and talk about Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School.
So, well, no, it's just I said last week I said that I would totally do a podcast where we watch an episode of Scooby-Doo and then do like a 20-minute like tear down of the episode. And the more I can't stop thinking about that.
okay, you didn't
I've just
say
been
that
thinking about
when
it
I was
all
here,
week.
but I would 100% do that podcast.
I think I said it in our chat.
I didn't
we talked
see it
about it on
either
the
way.
podcast. We talked about it on the show, I think.
I am like,
I didn't see it, but that is a good idea because
if the new year is a good time to start new podcasts. If it's still stuck in my head in 2 months or in 2 months, then I'll revisit that because Scooby-Doo is one of my favorite shows ever. And it's a verdant field to go through every Scooby-Doo episode because there's like
There's a lot.
shitload of them.
Have any of us watched Scoob,
No, I haven't watched a lot of the brand new stuff.
like the 2020 movie?
No. Oh no.
Is that the live
I
action
saw the
one?
trailer for it. Like,
No, it's like
no,
CG.
no,
it's
like
CG.
CG animated. Yeah.
Weird.
And they're like children, like young.
I don't
some
like. We
point.
went over this last week. This is a retread, but I don't like when they're young.
This is like, well, they're like early. They're like young adults, not
Look.
like children.
Let's lay it on the table. One of the best things about Scooby-Doo is the weird latent sexual tension that exists between all of the members of that cast because it's palpable in the original Scooby-Doo. And so when you make them children, it suddenly removes one of the good aspects of the show.
Okay.
Yeah, I have not watched it since I was a kid, so I did not pick up on these things. So I'd be interested to rewatch some of those episodes and be
mean,
like,
There was
like absolutely like Daphne and Fred
And
have
Daphne are the
attention,
main
and
are the
then-
core of
yeah.
that. But I think there's a Shaggy Velma connection there and a Velma Daphne.
Velma is
connection there.
actually
now everybody's into Daphne and Velma now.
And I'm not
but-
into it for the like. I don't need to see anything. I'm not like we have to go deeper or anything. I'm just here for the relationships. That's all.
Oh my god! This episode.
July 13th, 2020, Velma from Scooby-Doo is a lesbian and was supposed to
Yeah.
be explicitly gay in the O2 movie.
Cool. So I'm gonna Jeopardy style. This episode received critical acclaim. Got 5 out of 5s. It is destined to become an instant classic. I didn't know that there was a Scooby-Doo crossover with Supernatural.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Scooby-Doo crossover.
They do
with a lot of
crossovers
shit.
with like
Yeah.
everything.
I
in,
mean,
tw-
yeah,
in
I just-
2018 with Supernatural.
The thing that people don't know about Scooby-Doo is that it never stopped being pretty good.
Yeah.
Like it's been at a baseline level of quality forever. Like even I can admit that like the young Scooby-Doo or whatever.
A pup named Scooby-Doo.
Thank you. A pup named Scooby-Doo. See, this
Put
is how
some
little
respect
I
on
have.
that dog's name.
But it's a good show, even if I don't like it as much as the original or what came after. What's new, Scooby-Doo? Great. It's very good. Has a really good theme song too.
And
I don't want to
WWE.
insert myself into this,
Oh,
like
please
where
do.
if I'm not
Oh, go for
welcome,
it.
but at the same time, like if this podcast is gonna be a thing, I may have some thoughts about Scooby-Doo in general because I
So-
think it's a crunchy text
Yes.
to really unpack. Plus, Mystery Incorporated on the second season has an episode called Stand and Deliver, and they do a Twin Peaks homage.
Yes, I've seen that one.
God.
It's yes. So my idea
Okay,
for the
yeah.
show would have been like probably 3 people at a time and rotate the guests around and have different guests every week. So anyway, we'll see.
Yeah,
So
no,
stay
that's-
tuned for
There was a,
Skip
This sounds
idea.
amazing.
there was a Lego Scooby-Doo.
the
Oh, of
only.
course there
yeah.
was.
The only issue with it is it's already a lot of like. There is a degree of labor to getting people's schedules together to record a podcast. So to do a 20-minute episode feels like you spend a half an hour to an hour getting everybody together and then bullshitting before the podcast and then 20 minutes recording it.
That's why you record like 7 episodes contiguously.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
wanted to rotate the guests and it's I don't
true.
know. There's
No, but I
structural
mean, if
things
you don't have to do them all, you don't have to release them all in a row. You can.
without going too deep, podcasting is going to become part of my job in 2021. So I'm going to have to get
Nice.
better at scheduling and programming. So maybe
Wow.
I'll put those skills to use with the more fun podcast.
More fun than this one.
No,
Hey, there's
Hey.
nothing. There is nothing more fun than Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, you're
You can
right.
take that to the bank.
yeah, you might be right. Certainly not any of the video games that we've brought
Hey.
Any,
this week.
why are we so
what's
pessimistic?
not as what's not as fun as Scooby-Doo? Pokemon Sword and Shield.
Okay. I knew that you guys were gonna go there, and I was like,
Allison, I think Pokemon Sword and Shield is probably better than Watch Dogs Legion. So I'll say that.
okay. Well, I guess then I don't know. I've been going back and forth of like, do I need to play Watch Dogs Legion or not? But
It's not terrible. We'll talk about Watch Dogs
Okay,
Legion when I
okay.
get up, but we talk about Pokemon.
Because
Watch Dogs Legion is fine.
Pokemon Sword and Shield, I'm back on my bullshit. Because the new expansion for Sword and Shield, the Crown Tundra, is out. So I've been playing that, and then I'm also back on my shiny hunting bullshit. So anyways, Crown Tundra, it is the new area. It's a lot bigger than the Isle of Armor, which is the first expansion area. And the way I've described Crown Tundra to a lot of people, and I stand by it, is that basically as an expansion, it's oops all legendaries. So basically one of the first things that you run into is you run into a character who is who's traveled there to that area to like see a bunch of different legendary Pokemon. So you're basically joining him on this adventure to like see a bunch of legendary Pokemon, but including the new Pokemon Calyrex, who's the new legendary to this expansion. And then there's also a bunch of old legendaries, and I think they've brought back every single legendary that you can get either through the main stuff or through the new Dynamax adventures, which is vaguely, I've described it as kind of like a Pokemon roguelike in a weird way, because basically it's doing it's a bunch of Dynamax battles in a row. So it's pretty simplistic as a mode, but you get a rented Pokemon at the start of this, and you choose which path that you go down to, and each path has a different typing assigned to it, which basically then shows, hey, you can catch a Pokemon with a dark type in this path, or you can catch a Pokemon with a psychic type in this path. And you can choose to either take that Pokemon with you or to keep using your original Pokemon. With one Pokemon at the way end that you know the type for, and that is guaranteed to be a legendary. So it's definitely, it's pretty simplistic. Like when I say Pokemon roguelike, it's like this is a pretty short mode. It's you're very much just choosing these paths, and there's very little to it. But it's kind of I think the most interesting use of the Dynamax battle or the raid battles. So I'd say that it's interesting, and now so it's definitely interesting, and you're guaranteed to get a bunch of different legendary Pokemon, which feels a little bit overpowered, but at the same time, this is like end game content at this point. So
yeah, doesn't everything start at like level 70? Like everything you're facing?
Pretty much, yeah. But at the same time, this is all basically end game.
Yeah, the end game of like Sword and Shield was like in the late 60s. So yeah.
So it's there's a lot of content in here. It's definitely bigger than the Isle of Armor, and there's different ways that you can find these legendaries too, because one of the things that's back is the legendary birds, so Zapdos, Moltres, and Articuno. But then there's new forms for the region. And do any of you guys remember how you found the roaming legendaries in Gold worked?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, because this is basically that.
They'd show up on the mini map, and you'd go over to where they are. Blah blah blah.
Yeah, this is basically that, where you know where like what wild area each of them are wandering around in, and you basically have to like chase them down. Cool. But then there's the
do you have to read any Braille to like get some legendaries?
There's the Regirock, Regice, and Registeel.
Do you have to read Braille to get them?
No, you don't have to read Braille, but you have like there's like mini puzzles that you have to do. So it's like, okay. I don't want to necessarily spoil them, but they're like they're pretty basic puzzles that you do to basically you have to find these ruins that they're in, do a little mini puzzle to get in, and then you can catch them. So yeah, so there's a bunch of different things, and I think that there's even more stuff once you find all of the main legendaries in the campaign. So I guess I have plenty more to go, but it's I think it's a really good expansion, honestly, and some of the most fun I've had with Sword and Shield. So if you got the expansion and kind of played around with Isle of Armor, I think I didn't dislike the Isle of Armor, but I think this is definitely better and a fun way to get back in the game. And now, but I also just kind of fucked off and went shiny honey for a little bit. So and I don't have a shiny yet, but someday
you will. You'll get that Wooloo.
Someday I'll get that Wooloo. I took a break so that I could shiny hunt or shiny breed for what was I even breeding for?
Can't even remember the Pokemon you're breeding. This is sick. This is degenerate behavior.
With your rented
care
Pokemon.
About the Pokemon. All you care about.
It's the payoff.
Going to Pokemon
Honestly,
Blockbuster.
Yeah. I mean, like, let's be real.
Pokemon Mill over here.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's what I was thinking about. It's like what happens when you like release all of the Pokemon into the wild, and you're like, oh, well, here's 400 of them.
These domesticated Pokemon that you're releasing back into the wild.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bad scene. It's a bad scene.
It is. No, it is not great, but at the same time, I'm like,
are you at least spaying and neutering them before you release them back into the wild?
I'm working on Grookey right now, and
so basically already yes.
So
because people don't like Grookey is what I'm saying.
Oh, yes,
hey,
of course.
You shut your mouth.
Grookey is a good Pokemon, and
I didn't say me.
I will have a shiny,
hands.
but I have so far bred. Let's see if I can quickly find it. I have I have a lot of boxes of Grookey's right now.
Oh no.
Let's see. I have boxes, Grookey. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not almost 9 full boxes.
Purely of Grookey?
Only of Grookey. Only of like my leftover Grookey.
Oh god.
That are like
leftover.
That I'm like, I'm gonna release all of them because I don't need this many Grookey.
Just gonna unleash a swarm of green monkeys.
What does Grookey eat? That's going to devastate the environment of the
I don't know, man.
No, because Grookey can grow plants. So
the wild area.
So
grow some more like trees and shit.
Okay, so what is it called? Crown Tundra? What area of the UK is this facsimile for?
I fucking don't know because it's in the south, but it's also the coldest.
Yeah, but like isn't the island like flipped upside down? Like basically.
Yeah. Okay. So then it would be
like Scotland
kind
or
of
something.
Scotland-ish.
So you're releasing a bunch of fucking like green monkeys on Scotland.
Right now, I'm not in the Crown Tundra area because because of when I'm breeding them, I have to be near the daycare. So I'm.
So you can make these poor daycare employees take care of.
Well, also like my starter Pokemon, my starter Rillaboom is having a good time with that Ditto. So
ECE really stands for Early Chimchar Education.
Mate and release.
So someday I will have shinies. I really want a shiny Wooloo.
Put them on Craigslist when you're trying to get rid of them.
Well, I've gotten to the point where there is no value in a Grookey anymore because there's so many of them.
This is
getting weird.
Escalating.
Let's commodify them.
I want to
who like doesn't know Pokemon very well. Like,
Yeah.
The Pokemon player in the household is my partner Lynn, and I occasionally I find details about Pokemon that are deeply upsetting. And,
Yeah.
and this Calyrex fellow.
Oh yeah. Oh, Calyrex is like fucking wild. Where basically
is he the weird dad?
Huh?
Like,
Is Calyrex the weird dad?
No.
Oh.
He's the new legendary.
Oh, okay.
And it's a fun story. And I think that the one of the things that's really good about this expansion is that or about this particular one is that there's a lot of humor and there's a lot of like interesting storytelling. But Calyrex basically is taking over the body of the dude that you hang out with. So basically like possesses
Fucking rad.
the dude. And he's just like trying to communicate with you. And he's like, fuck it. I'm just going to possess this dude because I like that way I can talk to you through him.
Whatever. Mewtwo didn't need to possess nobody to talk to Ash.
Well, also that's true.
Casual Pokemon Calyrex.
I'll say I think one of the things that I think is really cool about oh Jesus, Sean Connery died.
Oh yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Sorry, that was one of those things that I saw just now, and I couldn't keep it in. That's really sad. Anyway, I think it's interesting that the Pokemon are gods in the legendaries are gods.
Oh, some of them are like basically I forget which one is like created time and space, but you're like maybe like a 10-year-old shouldn't be holding like catching that. Like
Maybe.
Maybe a kid doesn't need to catch that Pokemon.
It just
Hey, at least it's not like other JRPGs where you kill God. You just capture God in a tiny ball and keep them on your waist. Or
although the
put them
thing
in a
that was-
computer to never be seen again. And
The
just
thing
fill them, surround them with Grookey.
the thing that vaguely amused me was like when I was having a particular time of trying to go for my shiny Wooloo was having my Pokemon at the front be Eternatus, who is like the big like gonna destroy the world at the end of in Sword and Shield, but then you catch it, and I'm like, man, I'm freaking out these fucking Wooloo if I'm like, hey, here's this thing that was gonna destroy the entire world, and now I'm just have it.
But
Go
hey,
after those
you
level 2 Wooloo.
you normal
Yeah, exactly.
Wooloo, you're nothing
like-
to me. I don't even
I
care
will
about
destroy
you.
you with this Eternatus, but yeah.
So back to this like demonic possession.
Yeah.
I just like picturing it. All I can think is like the Harbinger from Mass Effect, and like how it possesses the Collector. You know, and everyone's like, "Oh, the Collector is like this guy. This Harbinger is terrifying," but no, it's just a normal Collector. I wonder if like something you're gonna get a similar reveal, and it's gonna turn into some like Eldritch horror game at some point.
I don't know. It's very like it's played off very much for laughs where he's just like this guy is like, oh boy, why was I sleeping outside? This is weird. And you're just like, dude, you were fucking like possessed for the past however long. This is a little strange.
Can I read a little bit of the Pokedex for Calyrex? Because this is the thing that jumped out to me.
Please.
Go for it.
This Pokemon ruled all of Galar in ancient times.
Yep.
Though it appears delicate and slight, its every move is filled with grace and dignity. Concern point, it also has extremely high intelligence, and it's said to see every past, present, and future event.
Yeah.
That sounds
There's
right for
alarming.
Pokemon.
There's Pokemon that are just they're just like
Like this Pokemon created time and space. You know, whatever.
Yeah, and like I was not kidding when it's like, yeah,
Wait a
this
minute.
this Pokemon created time and space. Like that's Diamond and Pearl is like they are basically the gods.
Amnesia Machine for Pigs just started making a lot more sense if there's Calyrexes running around in the UK for a Calyrex. I get it now.
Oh no.
You know, it's all coming together. It's all Calyrex
Yeah.
all the way down.
Yeah, that's what they were. That was exactly what Pokemon was intending. It was like okay, if anything, we're gonna make Amnesia: Machine for Pigs make sense.
There's like one kind of plot hole in Machine for Pigs, and it's not even really a game that's about filling the plot hole. It's more about the philosophy and like the esoteric concerns about imperialism and capitalism. But hey, we, the Pokemon Company, can kind of plug that one little gap. So let's do it with this DLC for Sword and Shield.
Anyways, yeah, I still think that Sword and Shield is a fun time, and I think a lot of people are generally really positive about the Crown Tundra. So if you have the game, I would recommend giving it a shot. I think it's a lot of fun, and I've been enjoying my time with it.
All right.
I wouldn't mind playing it, but I don't want to play all of Sword and Shield. So.
Honestly, that's fair. I don't blame you at all about that.
Just gotta hold out for Pokemon Gun. Someday it'll happen. We'll get a random Pokemon Direct, and they'll be like, "Here's like our brushing the teeth. Here's our sequel to the brushing teeth mini game or like phone game, and also Pokemon Gun.
Pokemon Gun, where you're in America."
Yeah. Well, they already did that one.
I know.
Like the one in New York, and that's the trash Pokemon.
There's one version on Xbox and one version on Xbox 360.
Hell yeah! Original Xbox and Xbox 360.
Yes.
Pokemon Gun and Pokemon Wet.
Oh no.
And Black.
What?
Xbox games. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because that's right. Because Wet and Wet. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Black had red barrels. You blew them up.
Yeah.
It also
first game to have red barrels. It's true.
It also had every single bullet you could hear the casing after you fired it hit the ground. If there ever was a Pokemon Gun, it was probably just the game Black.
I played a fair amount of Black, and it was all right.
It's fine.
All right. Yeah.
I'd like to go back and replay it sometime because I liked that a lot.
I don't. Are we talking about the same thing?
What have you been playing, Andre?
We're talking about a first-person shooter
Me?
called Black.
Yeah, not Pokemon Black.
Oh, I thought you said Pokemon Black.
No, we're talking about the Criterion game Black.
Yes.
Oh God, no! Pokemon Black is like a real game, though.
It is.
But so is Black.
That's why I was confused at first, is I didn't understand what Andre was referencing.
I didn't
I was
either.
like, there already is a Pokemon Black.
I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but Pokemon Black is a good game. So
Black was a game for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, and Xbox that had an Xbox version and a 360 version.
Yep. Same with Gun. Anyways,
it's a good shooter if you're looking for a shooter to play. At any point, everyone. I think it's backwards compatible on Xbox One. Anyway,
so what have you been playing, Andre?
Me, this is out of order. I have been playing. Let's see. So last week, we'll continue from our discussion last week of Amnesia Rebirth, the newest from Frictional Games, the third game in the Amnesia series, I guess. And I finished it. That game, it's got a lot of problems in that it feels like it came out 10 years ago. Like it very much feels like that first Amnesia, at least how I remember it. Pat could probably speak more to this since he's played Amnesia Dark Descent more recently, but just a lot of the puzzles, the physics, the way you're like in the world and your space and how you're interacting with things through the controls, it's not great.
Like in original Amnesia, you would do stuff like click your mouse on a door and swing your mouse back to open it, right? That kind of stuff.
Yep. Yep. And you're still doing that here. You're doing cranks by doing your mouse in like a circle pattern. Like so there's
how I crank it.
Yep. Yeah, and you're picking up items and
circular
like
patterns.
dragging them around the environment. So that stuff didn't age well, I think. So that stuff is a little disappointing because you have to engage with a lot of that kind of bad feeling design. But the story is really good, and the execution around it of the horror elements, I think, is maybe the best they've done out, like at least on a first try, because like Soma, they had people didn't really like the monster and the way it was in the world, and so they're like, okay, you just will make it so the monster doesn't really matter. And they took those lessons and they applied them to Rebirth, where the monsters are there, they're scary, but ultimately, like if you get caught, it's not like a major issue. You're not going to get sent back 20 minutes or something and lose a ton of progress. So they're much better about just propelling you forward, which is always, I think, the thing that kills a horror game is when you die and then suddenly you're like, I have to replay the section. Now it's not really scary. I know what to expect. I'm just dealing with like the, okay, now I have to be like extra careful and not get caught or whatever. And when you don't have to deal with that, it becomes like you can engage with it on like you can be scared and you go, okay, I'm not supposed to like do this. I want to try and
the monsters
not die or whatever. Yeah, the monsters are still there. They're in your way. And like, I want to explore. I want to find like the notes and get all that information. And like, you could just run into kind of some rooms and just minor mechanical spoilers. Like if you die, you just respawn, basically. Not respawn, but you are placed back in the world in like a nearby.
Like, kind of like a birth, as though you're back, like a rebirth?
No. But yeah, you just you get back in the area in a different space, and it kind of clears the area so the enemies are gone mostly.
Yeah. It's almost like this, again, we're still kind of in minor spoiler territory. It's really not that big of a deal. You actually find this out very early on, whether or not you kind of pick up on it. But it's almost like a Prince of Persia Sands of Time rewind mechanic, except you don't control the rewind. That's basically
it's not even necessarily a rewind. It could put you like forward.
Yeah. But it kind of, that's sort of how they stylize it.
Yeah.
And
it's like a fight or flight thing where you're basically just like, I have to get out of here, and going to like a nearby safe area.
Oh, see, I actually read it differently. Maybe we will.
Well, maybe I don't know how far you've gotten there
for a more spoilery thing.
So yeah, maybe that depends on how far you are in the game.
Could be. I don't know. Either way, I think that it's funny I think all of that like physicsy stuff is actually like, to me, that is what the game is like. That is what makes it an Amnesia game. I think it's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
I think what makes it an Amnesia game is they have amnesia.
Well, yeah, sure. But I think the first game leans really hard. I replayed Dark Descent and Machine for the first time played Machine for Pigs, which I haven't had time to actually write the article I want to write because we got a puppy. But Machine for Pigs is fucking fantastic. I am really surprised that game had such a poor reception when it came out. Or I'm not surprised, I guess, because of where the discourse was at the time. If you didn't play that game back then because you were you heard it wasn't good, it's extremely good. It's really, really good. It's like 4.5 hours long, so it's easy to squeeze into an afternoon or an evening if you play a lot of games anyway. Really phenomenal game. The story is exceptional. Anyway, I think that Rebirth, at least so far as I have gotten, which is I'm only about a third to halfway through the game.
What was the last thing you did?
The thing we talked about last.
Okay.
I think that the physics stuff feels better in it than in previous Amnesia games, and they don't ask you to do so far as I've been through it, which even if they do this later on, at this point, I had already done 2 or 3 of these kinds of things in Dark Descent, like really kind of bad physics puzzles, where you have to I played with a guide because I didn't wanted to just get through it, which makes it a lot less scary, but also I just want to see the story. And I didn't want to watch somebody else play it. So, and the puzzles in Dark Descent are not very good. They're like, one room will have 3 weights suspended from the ceiling, and you're supposed to realize that that means in the room across the hall, you have to hold the lever in place until each of the 3 weights in that room mirrors the other side of the room, which is like not very intuitive. And there's nothing to indicate that that's how it works. There's no lore or narrative justification for why you're doing it. It's just like, I don't know, this is how you fix the elevator. And it's like, what? And so far in Rebirth, I haven't seen anything like that.
There's nothing that bad.
And there's
I think one of the big issues
in Dark Descent.
Also, like a lot of times they'll put a monster in an area where in like Dark Descent, they'll kind of in an area where you're trying to find stuff or puzzle solve, they'll put a monster where they don't really do that in Rebirth. So you're able to kind of differentiate these things. And there's like a little bit of like, oh, I'm not safe anymore, but they give you space to like think about what you're doing, and it's not like the puzzles aren't super physicsy, so you don't have to worry about that at least.
Yeah, that I like about Rebirth a lot, and like in some ways I like the way that I won't spoil any specific puzzles, but there's a puzzle about like, I don't know, an hour and a half in that is very much physicsy, but not in the sense that Dark Descent is, where it's like, I'm going to pull these levers and move these things. It's more like, wait, how does physics work? Oh, right. This is how I need to do this. And it feels pretty satisfying. I'll message you, Andre, the thing that I'm talking about, but I think it's been pretty great so far. And the thing that minor narrative spoilers for anyone who is really invested in the Amnesia story and hasn't played yet. I think this is fine if you're planning to play the game and maybe might make you more interested. There is a thing that this game does with the concept of, it's very much still inspired by sort of Lovecraftian cosmic horror. And the thing that it does that is so impressive to me with where I'm at thus far is the way that it characterizes the things that exist and the worlds that exist on the other side of, the portal or whatever, where in Lovecraft stories, one of their great faults, because in a lot of cases, the big bad evils are facsimiles for like cultures and ethnicities that Lovecraft was afraid of, is that they don't, when there's when elder things are going to come to Earth and kill everyone, yes, they have like a society on their side of the portal, but you don't ever learn anything about it other than like, it's horrible, it's a nightmare. And Rebirth is more interested in saying, wait, what do these beings like think like and talk like and act like? And you're like actually getting some insight into their culture, which I think is really cool, and really, really well done. And so that's a huge plus in the game's favor. So I'm very excited to finish it and play through the rest of it.
It has some very ambitious narrative moments. I look forward to seeing how you like end the game, like what kind of path you take when you get there. Because these games, I don't know about Machine for Pigs, but like their other games have had like multiple endings, not like these elaborate branching paths, just like kind of not necessarily binary, but you've got like, okay, pick 3, your Mass Effect 3 ending, if you will. So it's I felt pretty good about the way things went down, but it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on it, because there are some very ambitious moments that I think they land and they execute well. And part of that is there aren't really many games, at least like big games, that deal with motherhood in the game space. We've gotten the dad game has become so ubiquitous at this point. It's like Sony's entire brand at this point, almost. But now we've got the mom game in Amnesia Rebirth, and it's interesting. And definitely one worth checking up, even if you feel like, oh, horror games are too scary for me, or, I had trouble with Amnesia, because of the way they have dealt with, or the way they've implemented the scary bits and the creatures, it's a lot easier to just push past that stuff. Like there were so many sections that I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna run through here because it's kind of meant for that, or like I don't think I'm gonna miss out on anything. And they tie it back to they actually do tie it back just a little bit to the first Amnesia game.
Yep,
just a little bit.
I think you don't need to replay that game if you played it back then. But if you, like me, had not played it, I think it's worth seeing it because it was kind of a important game. And having played it, I'm glad that I played it. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I took the time to spend a few hours going through it with a guide. And because so much of Amnesia Dark Descent is padded on those sequences where you're in the dark kind of scraping around while a monster chases you. So if you have a guide, you can cut that game's length in half.
Rebirth feels a lot more deliberate.
Yes. There are certain moments in that game that it's cards on the table. I mean, if the game continues to strike me in the way that it has thus far, I anticipate having it in a pretty high spot on my own lists. I think that's it's because it's pushing my specific buttons so much. I don't necessarily mean to say that I think like must play for everyone. So I'm not necessarily saying I would argue for it super high on like a group list, but I know personally I'm really, really, really enjoying it. And there's been almost every moment that involves an enemy, but several moments where malevolent forces have appeared, and I have just been like, holy shit, that was cool. That was so well done, the way that happened. And the enemies themselves are not particularly scary when you're like face to face, in my opinion, but the way that they deploy them is really, really cool and smart so far. Anyway.
They do some ambitious moments. They land them, I think. And I look forward to talking to you more about it once you finish it. The other thing I've been playing that Pat has also put a little time into is Ghost Runner, which I talked about months ago with like, I don't even know. This is one of the Steam Game Fest things. They had a demo for this. This is the first person not parkour, like free running Mirror's Edge type game where you have a katana, and it's very good cyberpunk dystopia. You're like a robot ninja with some
like Raiden.
Kind of.
Yeah, basically, yeah. You've got high heels and white blood.
You're not as cool as Raiden.
Is Raiden cool?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
He's like anime cool. I don't know if he's like
yes.
Cool.
Raiden is cool. We're not litigating that here.
But yeah, I remember you talking.
You're wrong. Raiden's cool.
Wasn't the demo like 5 minutes or something, Andre? Like it was really short.
It's like the first 2 levels, and it could be really short if you're like, this is a game that is like, it's timed. You're meant to do things really quick, like a Mirror's Edge, where you're running through these levels, and theoretically, I think they want you to play it multiple times and get your runs down, and because this is like a one-hit, one-kill game. You kill everyone in one hit, and you get killed in one hit.
Like Super Hot.
Yes. It's like Super Hot meets Mirror's Edge meets like Katana Zero, or like what's that ninja game? Mark of the Ninja.
What's that ninja game?
It's Pikachu.
It's Metal Gear.
My partner was
God damn it.
My partner was watching me play Ghost Runner, and she was like, oh, is this like Super Hot? And I was like, kind of. It's got that, like, you can slow time down. You've got like, you're not like throwing so much stuff, but like the time stuff and the one-hit kills really bring it to Super Hot-esque levels, where it also ties into like Katana Zero or Mark of the Ninja. And then so it's a cool game for like checking out
Cyberpunk City and doing sick wall runs and shit and like super cool ninja stuff.
I think they should, if you get this game and start playing it and get frustrated with the way the enemies are work early, you get an ability that lets you deflect their bullets fairly early. I think that should have been something they give you.
I think
by
it was
default
in the demo.
Yeah, I mean, I think
so
it makes the
you
game
should just have that, but
infinitely more playable. Because I was very frustrated early on, not even because I thought it was particularly hard. It just felt very like unfair, kind of, where it's like the way the enemies choose to shoot at you is like sometimes they have a predictable like pattern, and then sometimes they just like aimbot you and they like lead you, and then you get hit by them even if you're trying to dodge. It's just it can be frustrating, but that deflect ability gives you the chance to like send their bullet back at them, or at least deflect it away, and it makes it a lot more like, oh, I have an active defense measure other than just dodging. And
you start to unlock other abilities. Like I think I just got a second ability. The first one you get is like a blink, where you kind of slow things down, and then you can line up like a couple people, and then you can slice through them just instantly, or you can slice through bullets even, or like laser blasts, I guess is what they are, because it's the future cyberpunk. Ooh.
Is that like a horse
and
sound?
You've got it's a cyberpunk horse.
They should have started the game with the clip. They should have gotten like, fuck it. They should have stole it from CD Projekt because they deserve it. The clip of Keanu Reeves saying, "Wake the fuck up, samurai, we've got a city to burn," and that should have just been the intro to Ghost Runner, and then no more narration through the rest.
I mean,
of the game.
that's basically what it is.
It's basically the plot of Ghost Runner. So
to wake up.
Why
don't you put on a little makeup?
Like, it is actually very
yes.
But the Crocodile Chop, it is very similar to like that kind of idea of you've got this AI in your head and it's got a vendetta, and so you're there to kind of do what it says. You've got amnesia, tie into that.
Hey.
Yeah.
Are you descending?
You're ascending.
Oh fuck!
The opposite.
The light ascent. Got it.
I think it's a really cool game.
Bright. Yeah.
I think
the bright ascent.
I think some of it's some of the checkpointing sucks. And some of it is perfect. That's the thing, is it's like sometimes you get just the perfect checkpoint to try a room over and over, and it's very satisfying. Sometimes it's like, I have to jump over this thing every time. Why didn't you just put me on the other side of the thing?
Yeah.
There's no skill involved in vaulting over it. And instead, all it does is every 10th time I try it, I fuck up the timing on the vault, and then I fall and I have to wait another 10 seconds. Not really, because you don't have to wait.
It is very snappy. Like you just hit R and then you're like respawn.
But you do have to wait to die.
Yeah.
So if the issue is you fall down something, you have to fall for a while before you finally die. So there's some frustrations like that. I'm a little hesitant to say. I've seen some people saying it's like, holy shit, this is one of the best games of the year. I have not yet hit that moment where I'm like, oh my god, this is amazing. But it's really fun. It's cool. I recommend it if you're into doing cool cyberpunk ninja samurai stuff.
If you can put in the time, or if you're the type of person who likes to put in the time into something like a Mirror's Edge, or like those kinds of like high precision platformer type games, 3D platformers, then I think you'll find a lot to like here.
Yeah.
This is going to sound like a really weird comparison, and sorry for that. But to me, like, I really like Trials. Like, and this sounds like it kind of has a similar vibe to Trials in that, like, you're trying stuff, you're getting into the mechanics, you're maybe doing a run over a couple of times to really get it. So, like,
I mean, like, it's they're continuous levels. Like, the levels are long, but they've got like discrete encounters. Like, so maybe you'll have like 5 like combat encounters over the course of one level, and then like solving some puzzles. But I wouldn't say it's very like Trials like. Because there's basically one path through everything, and it's not super difficult. But
yeah, that's why I'm like thinking it's not a perfect comparison, but like it sounds like it could hit those same kind of like.
I think
pleasure
if
zones.
you like Trials and also think Mirror's Edge is cool in theory, then totally.
It's Mirror's Edge if Mirror's Edge had like done combat in a smart way.
Yeah,
It didn't just give you a crappy gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
do
you've
wish
got
that
like
you had
grappling
a,
hooks and like air dashes and stuff. So
I do wish that you had
Interesting.
a gun. Maybe you get one eventually. I'm sure that might be an ability, but
maybe get like some like shuriken or something. I don't
yeah.
know.
What I'm really hopeful for with Ghost Runner, first of all, it's kind of long for what it is, in that it's like 12 levels or something, and each one could take you anywhere from like 10 minutes on the first try to like a half an hour. So it's hard to say. Hard to say how long it is, but I was surprised after playing for like an hour. I was like 3 levels in, and there were a lot left.
I saw, so it will show you your like Steam friends times, and so I saw like after the second level, it's like, here's what Pat did, and I was like, oh, I'm like 5 minutes ahead of Pat. I'm good.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I just suck at it. It's possible.
Maybe it's possible. I don't
Does
know.
it have
You
a
said
story?
it on me. Yeah. So
Okay.
you've got the AI in your head, who is basically, he's like, you are my bodyguard, but I'm dead now. But this is like, there's a lot of time has passed, and he basically wants revenge on someone. I'm not
On
sure
Dr.
right now.
Does he
Yeah,
also
Dr.
want
Octopus, right?
does he also want vengeance?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So-
He
so
wants
there's some-
vengeance on Doc Ock. And when I say that, it's because literally Dr. Octopus from Into the Spider-Verse is at the start of the game in a cutscene.
It's just,
yep, it's
just
just
a big
her.
ol', yeah.
She got a haircut, but it's just her. Otherwise, I was like,
So-
this is almost something they should worry about for copyright purposes, because that is a Dr. Octopus if I've ever seen her.
Yeah, it's borrowing from a lot, but it's got its own thing going enough that it's
It's very fun to
cool.
play. I really hope that you can go back through the game with all the upgrades unlocked,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that the upgrade system and the way it's basically like you play Tetris on a board with different
Yeah.
pieces to put upgrades in.
It's like Tetraminos in like a Resident Evil 4 style attaché case to like
Yeah.
do your
It reminds me
do
of
your power ups.
reminds me a little bit of Nier Automata, how the cell, how like putting the chips in worked, except
Sure.
it's more, except you're dealing with Tetraminos instead of like slots.
Just like
So it's cool. That stuff is neat.
yeah, you got like, oh, I can't put anything in this square, so I've got to like put stuff around this square, and you're
Yeah.
unlocking stuff over the
And it
course of
convinces
it.
you to try things that you wouldn't have tried, because you're like, well, I really want to use this ability, but the only thing that fits with it is this other one that I think is garbage, but I guess I'll plug it in because why not? And then you go, oh, that's useful. It's more useful than I thought it would be. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I've been playing. I've also picked up Art of Rally, but I don't really have much to say about that. I played like one race in that. It's like a neat little pastel-y isometric rally game from the creator of Absolute Drift, if you ever played that. But I'll probably talk about that next week after I've put some more time in. Oh, and also Dark Pictures, the new game, which I want to talk about, but I haven't played enough of it yet. So next week.
Cool.
In the meantime,
It's going to be November next week. You can't talk about scary games anymore.
Oh,
The window is closing
Today.
Okay. So
No, I'm just kidding. You can talk about it next week.
What's it called? I can't even remember what it's called. Little Hope.
Yes.
Unreadable. No. Okay. Yeah. So next on our list, who we're gonna go to? Let's go, Pat. I want to know about your secret surprise.
Okay, we could talk. I'll talk about this stuff very briefly. This is stupid. I only just said a secret surprise because if I had put it down, people have been like, "What the fuck is this?"
You
Friend of
know,
mine-
you say that, but when I saw that in our notes, when I got up this morning, I was like, oh,
It's to make everyone far more
Secret
excited than they'll be once I
secret
share what it is.
surprise.
How does everyone feel about a fellow
Farm Simulator.
my friend and yours, Napoleon Bonaparte?
You playing Psychonauts again?
No,
Like the historical figure?
The historical figure, yeah. How do you feel about Napoleon? 10 words or less.
Complex feelings about him.
That's
I read that.
Very good.
I read that Reddit relationships post about the guy who got obsessed
Oh my
with Napoleon.
god, that was so good.
And he
Well,
was like
that
buying Napoleon
Philip
books and buying like scrolls of Napoleon.
Perhaps you
and
could
putting
have
them on
sex with Napoleon
on the
in
wall.
Hold Fast, Nations at War, a game that I spent a few hours digging into last night. That is hilarious and very fun to play with.
Did you
some
have
good
sex with
friends.
Napoleon?
No, but maybe that's in there. I don't know. I didn't get that deep into it.
You could say that about any game.
Yeah, but this game's actually about Napoleon.
Allison,
I mean,
can you
not
have sex with
specifically.
Napoleon and Pokemon Crown Tundra?
I not that I'm aware of, but again, I haven't finished it. So
You can't even have sex with Napoleon in Assassin's Creed Unity, which is a game that is explicitly about like
true.
France and
During the French
Revolutionary
Revolution. Yeah.
No, Hold Fast Nations at War, I just want to touch on briefly because it's fucking hilarious. And I don't think anyone on this podcast should play it. And most people listening probably shouldn't play it. Not because it isn't good. It's very good at the thing it sets out to do, but it's basically like Battlefield, except like Napoleonic warfare in the 18th century. And you can play as Prussia or France or Britain or Russia. And it's really funny because it's like you're playing Battlefield, but you have muskets. So you get to shoot one time and then you press R to reload, and then there's like a timer on screen and your character goes through all of the animations of like putting the cartridge in and tamping down the powder and it's funny. It's very good. And there's a button that you can press. You press the B key by default, and I forget what they call it, but it's basically the like yell button where your character will yell something in their native language.
Like in Chivalry.
Yes, just like in Chivalry. Just like in Chivalry.
Okay.
And you got cannons, you got artillery where you're like trying to aim the artillery. There's different classes. If you're a line infantry, you simply cannot operate a cannon. That is just not done. And there's interesting mechanics, like the battlefields are huge, as you would expect, and mostly empty because that's how Napoleonic warfare worked. They just fought in big, huge fields. So you spawn all the way back at your camp, and it sucks to run all the way. But if someone spawns the flag bearer, you can spawn on them and then get back into the fight faster. You can be a musician. You can play a fife. I played a fife for a while last night.
Can you put in
play
MIDI
a fife
tracks?
Huh?
Can you put in MIDI tracks for your fife?
No, I don't know. You can't. When you click the button to start playing, and then a little menu pops up, and you click on what song you want to play. So it's possible that you could load in your own songs. I don't know. Probably. I'll tell you, most of the time, the music that you're listening to is actually whatever the people near you are blasting through on their voice chat.
Hell yeah.
So I heard some sea shanties, because there are also naval encounters where you're on ships, which are very fun because you're like trying to physically shoot the cannons at people, because it's like one person's the captain and they helm the ship, but then all the other sailors have to actually fire the cannons manually. It's pretty fun. It's stupid in some ways, but it has interesting ideas. Like, obviously muskets are wildly inaccurate, so you'll aim and fire at someone, and even if they're standing about 50 feet away and you aimed right at them, your musket ball may like go super wide. So they give you benefits to I think bonuses to your accuracy. I could be wrong, but if you got a drummer and a fife player right there, you're standing by a standard bearer who's helping people spawn, and you got an officer that sets up a firing line, which actually shows you in the environment where you need to stand to shoot, and then everybody shoots at the same time, you get a massive bonus to your accuracy. So it's like people who actually organize and say like, and do all that stuff will definitely win the game, which is very interesting. And it like incentivizes you to role play as the kind of the characters that you're playing. And it kind of fits in, like what I was saying about Phasmophobia last week, to that role play area where this is not a game like Battlefield or Call of Duty, which are games that I like, where you're like trying to have high skill. It's more about, I am a line infantry. I need to walk with other line infantry, and there's like artillery going over your head and people screaming stuff in voice chat. So far, I didn't actually hear anything like vile in voice chat, particularly. There's one captain who was hurling some insults at another vessel that I found a little bit ribald, and not quite to my taste, but nothing like slurs or anything deeply offensive.
That's surprising for the internet.
Yeah, which is part of the other reason I bring it up, because it is a game that has like a pretty solid community from what I've heard, and you can and you kind of need to communicate to perform well. The nice thing though is it's the nougaty core of this, and then we can move on, is it has a feature that every single multiplayer game should adopt until the end of time, which is at all times on screen it shows you a button prompt for just turning off voice chat. So if you ever need to like completely bail out of voice chat, you just push this button and it shuts off all incoming and outgoing voice chat. Instead of having to go into a menu and turn it off, you just press the button and then you can press it again to turn it back on. So if you're standing by someone and they're saying a bunch of hateful garbage, you can turn it off altogether. And then the next time when they're like not near you, you can turn it back on because it's all proximity based. So that part's kind of nice.
Yeah,
cool
Dota did something similar to that, where you would open up the scoreboard and they would just have like a little mute or
they do that
icon.
There's like scoreboard mute stuff in a lot of shooters too, but this is such a faster, you don't even have to know who it is that's saying the junk around you. You just
it's just a global kind
it's
of
just a global shut off. It's like a global like I don't want to talk to people anymore, which is really, I mean, it has push to talk too, so it's not like it's open mic. Otherwise, there's a mute button to mute yourself. There's push to talk you can turn on. And then also it has this global mute that you can just turn off all voice chat, which I think is a really cool feature for, I saw that and was like, I would engage with a lot more team-based games if there was an option to do that, because if I could just have like a safety switch that's like, nope, I don't want to hear this anymore. Because that's the reason that I totally bailed off of Valorant, is because I had 2 or 3 games in a row with one pub player. The rest of the people were people I knew, and they called me really awful, like terrible bullshit. And I was like, you know what? I've spent basically an hour of my night getting called slurs. I'm not going to play this game anymore.
Sometimes you're like, I'm going to treat myself and not
and I'm
be called slurs.
I mean, I will go play. Obviously, Modern Warfare I always like to preface, has a billion political problems, and is not, it sucks in a lot of ways. But one of the ways it doesn't suck is that you can play that game and never talk to another person. So I just was like, nope, I'm just going to play that game with my friends and not get called horrible shit. And so I think it's cool that Holdfast has a good way to just cut off voice communication, because it's also, I didn't use it because anyone was rude or mean, but someone was blasting EDM on, we were playing on a European server. Yeah. And at first it was funny. And then like after 2 minutes of hearing the like blown out EDM coming from this person riding their horse around back and forth, I was like, okay, I'm done with this, and shut off the voice chat.
Was this from the Russian faction?
In fact, it was.
That makes total sense.
We were on a European server because there's actually almost always at least 2 or 3 full servers. It has, which is only like, it's 150 players per game. So it's only like, it's under 1,000 people playing usually, but
big servers.
You can find a game, and it has a server browser instead of matchmaking. So it works. But the only server that was open was the European server. So we were playing on that. And yeah, we were Russia, and there was a lot of EDM blasting happening.
That checks out for Russia. Okay. Yeah. I have one question. One of my favorite parts of Chivalry is going into a server with low grav, because as soon as low gravity is on, the game the game wasn't programmed with it in mind. So anytime you like jump really high and then start falling, your guy or whatever just starts going, like screaming as though they're falling. And just everyone on the server is screaming because they all think they're falling. Does this game have that?
No, not specifically.
Very specific.
I'll say, like when we sieged a fort at one point. This game, I mean, you have 75 people per team. It is a cacophony of people just slamming the B key so that their characters are just like,
that's pretty good too.
Yeah, they're just screaming in whatever language the faction is.
Also a good part of
and there's like 4 or 5 different things they can say. So it's just like it's not the same thing over and over. It's just like people screaming. And then if you play on the European server, which you should, even though the pings are bad, because you also get people role playing in voice chat and screaming things in their native language. And so it's like, is it the game or is it someone in voice chat?
It's a cultural experience, is what you're
Who's to
saying.
say?
It was a lot of fun. We had fun. We played for like an hour and a half or so and enjoyed it a lot. And
Sounds
it's
very dumb.
Yeah, it is. It's on sale right now for like $10. So if you find yourself looking for a Battlefield-esque experience, it's well made too. Like it does all the things it's trying to do pretty well. So it's not particularly janky or anything.
And
Andre. Oh, never mind.
I hear
you now.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Good.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Cyberpunk, because that would have been a much better segue. So we'll go back. We're going to delete all of what you just said. We're going to do this next segment, and then we'll redo the last one. And you can tell us all about Watch Dogs Legion.
It's okay.
Everything. Tell us 100% about this game. Everything you know.
I mean, first of all, it's totally cool if you look at Watch Dogs Legion or any of Ubisoft's upcoming releases and say, I don't want to give Ubisoft any of my money. They're shitty, because they are.
It's true.
For a variety of reasons. So I definitely want to preface it with that. I was interested in playing Watch Dogs because some of the discourse around it was, I'm always interested in playing games that are like meh for some reason. I'm much more interested to see how people arrive at the opinion that a game is like just okay than either really bad or really great. I don't know why that is.
It's like that's like when we had Monty on however many months ago, and
Yes.
she asked, what is the most average anime you can think of?
It totally,
Yeah.
yeah. It's very much
Cowboy
that.
Bebop.
And so I grabbed a
I see that face, Jeff.
I grabbed a month of Ubisoft Connect Plus or whatever the fuck it's called now.
Connect.
Which was I won't get into it. A terrible
Okay.
process of trying to actually get a month of that. But anyway, and so I installed Watch Dogs Legion. I will say one nice thing about Ubisoft Uplay Plus, whatever the fuck it is, you get the ultimate versions and the season passes of the games that,
That's good.
Oh,
which is how all of those services should work. It's bullshit
That's
to
all right.
like
Yeah.
have to buy a season pass for something that you're getting through a subscription. But yeah, so that's nice. But yeah, I don't know. It's like the game starts, and I mean, spoilers for the opening mission of Watch Dogs. You shouldn't care about this. Like the spoilers, you shouldn't care about the spoilers. The opening mission, you're playing as like a MI5 agent infiltrating Parliament with like DedSec people. DedSec being the good guy hackers from Watch Dogs, kind of guiding you along, and you find out that like there's these bombs all over Parliament. And you have to disable them to save everyone's lives that are in Parliament at the middle of the night. And it is like, as someone who's played most of Ubisoft's open world games for at least a little bit each, this one is like, it plays like The Division, which kind of played like Watch Dogs 2, which kind of plays like Assassin's Creed if you use a mouse and keyboard, sort of. Like, it's weird how this game just doesn't feel like it has any identity whatsoever when it comes to controlling it, because it is just, it's fine, but it's like, I mean, it's very much like playing The Division 2, which is a game I do not like. You kind of start off by like choking these people out. And for context, Watch Dogs 2 is a game where you can play the whole game without killing a single person. And I didn't particularly like the world in Watch Dogs 2, but the characters are fantastic. And the story is like goofy at times and like pretty well thought out tonally. Watch Dogs Legion is like, I went into the room and they were like, oh, you have to move quietly, take out the guards from behind. And I walked up and then he just fucking snaps the guy's neck. I was like, okay. We got some we're different stakes here, I guess. And so I snapped several people's necks, and then you find out that you have to disable these bombs. There's like this AI voice called Bagley that's talking to you and is very much like a Jarvis. Sounds almost identical to Jarvis, but not as good because Jarvis is portrayed by like a good actor versus Bagley being like a fairly stock standard. No offense to Bagley's voice actor. I'm sure it's partly the script, but anyway, then the game's like, oh fuck, waves of enemies are coming in. You got to shoot these guys. And then you just handed a 9mm and you have to just kill waves of very stupid enemies that run into the room 3 at a time and stand there and shoot at you. And the shooting is fucking terrible. It's like you're shooting a Nerf gun. Like that's what the you can see the bullets slowly leave the gun and then slowly travel to the enemy, and it looks like a Nerf dart. I was like, and I thought so much so that I was like, am I using some kind of tranquilizer gun? But it's not. It's a gun. And then you get an MP5 and you shoot a lot more people with an MP5. And then you find out that it was all for naught because there were bombs all over the city and they all blow up instead. And the bad guy hacker is like, ha ha ha, I got you. And then he kills the MI5 agent. So It's like, it's a much darker intro than Watch Dogs 2, which was like teen hacker who is rad sneaking into a facility and specifically not killing anyone. But after that, you're presented with a character select screen where you kind of pick your first, and there's narrative stuff between all this, but it's whatever. It's extremely predictable stuff that you would expect. And you pick a character, and that's kind of the interesting part of this game is the procedural character generation that it does, where you have anyone can be a player character in the game. I think it's important to note that like their marketing campaign of like play as anyone is kind of bullshit. I don't know that there are, I mean, they're not representing everyone in this game. There are like disabilities that are not represented in this game specifically. There are I am sure that there are like genders and sexualities not represented in this game. I'll say they don't specifically, it's not like everyone is cis and straight. I believe that there are trans characters and there's people that have varying sexualities, but still I think they need to do better if they're going to say play as anyone, because that language sounds inclusive in a way that it is not. So sorry.
Right. That's like a tall order. And when you have the resources of Ubisoft, like you don't really have.
No, it's hard to animate women.
And thankfully that's not on display here. But I mean, I think, and maybe I haven't played it very much. Maybe there are people who use wheelchairs in the game. I don't know. I don't believe they've shown any of that in their marketing, which is something that I would have done if I were to use a slogan like play as anyone.
I mean, play as anyone is like, not to take away from what you're saying, because what you're saying is absolutely true, but it's so easy to go, you can play as any of the characters we've made here that exist in these open world games.
Right.
So.
I agree.
I mean, like also the marketing was very much like you can play as a grandma, you know, like
that's what I'm getting at.
Like,
yeah.
So anyway, that caveat aside, I feel it's important to point that out because it's something that's irked me about their marketing the whole time. But that caveat aside, it is interesting to see the way that they kind of spread these characters out. And they have bios that don't really inform their gameplay, but are also, it might be like, oh, this person's a rich stockbroker, and so they have like a discount card at a clothing store or something. Like they have a platinum card for clothes, which, and then it goes all the way from like that to like, oh, this person has a gun. That's their special thing.
Oh shit.
Like they come with a firearm.
I saw one, and it was someone's like the person was a musician. Their trait was like trumpeter, and their most recent like internet search was, "When do you empty the spit valve on a trumpet?"
Some of that stuff is pretty clever.
It's like, but it's like you're in your 50s.
Yeah, true.
And
they should know that already.
You should know this.
Yes, that's very true. Correct. The character I ended up choosing was a character named Tanaka, who is a professional, is Japanese and is a professional MMO player. And I picked him because he seemed cool, and he has a recon drone for his like special thing you can just call. The problem is that as soon as I started playing as him, I really wish they let you preview their voice, because as soon as I started playing as him, he was like, "We got this, fam. You hard." And I was like, "No, I don't want this. I made a poor decision. I don't want to play as this character, but there's nothing I can do. There's no way for me to get a do-over." You can recruit more, obviously, so I don't have to play as him forever. But he was, and he was like, "This is fucking mental," and stuff, like very like playing up the like shit is wild right now. And it's like, yeah, man, you decided to join a hacker collective. You were like walking down the street and then decided to join a hacker collective and then just ran to a building and now you're a hacker. It is pretty mental. You're right.
So
I don't know.
The characters, is there enough depth to any of them to where you would want to find their entire story? Like,
They don't have stories.
Okay,
That's
great.
the thing.
Wonderful.
That I mean, they have their background that you read in their bio, but they don't have stories. The
That's
story,
like the extent to it is that like you reading that like little blip
Yeah.
that like
yeah.
you don't when to open the spit valve.
The
Like, that's
comparison,
it.
the real comparison is XCOM here. That's what you're doing. I mean, you're in the sense that you can totally like role play these characters and kind of map your own lore to them, which is interesting. And if you like doing that, I think that there might be some fun to be had with it. But they have no depth. The characters have no depth whatsoever.
You know what?
Which is like the problem with the whole thing.
The first thing that comes to mind is this sounds just like the Caligula effect. We
Yeah.
talked about that last year or something, and it's like basically a Persona kind of game where there's like hundreds of characters and you can kind of get to be friends with any of
Yes.
them, but their stories are just generic. Like it's
Yes.
like there's a few that have interesting stories, but like it's just so generic, and it's like it's just a mile wide and an inch deep, right? Like
The characters in Genshin Impact have like 1 billion times more story than the characters in Watch Dogs Legion. And you know, the thing is that's frustrating about this approach, and I knew this was going to happen. I don't know why this is a narrative problem that I don't trust them to solve if their big gun that they're bringing in is Chris Avellone, like who is the guy that they was supposed to like solve this problem.
Yeah.
But is the story of the game. There are main characters in the game. You just don't play as them. The main characters are the talking heads on your radio. There's Sabine, and who's the woman who kind of runs DedSec, and Bagley, and I guess there's other characters too. And they talk. They do tons of talking. They're always constantly talking in your ear about the story, and they're always constantly talking to other characters. And you're just kind of your characters talk.
Cipher.
But you're just sort of a cipher that runs around and they're like, now you got to go here and do this. Now you got to go here and do this. And it's disappointing because I think there's actually an interesting game in there if they had said, okay, here's 2 hours of setup narratively. Now what you're playing is more of a procedural open world game where, like an XCOM, you have an end goal in mind, and you're probably going to play it over and over and over again, trying to achieve that. That could have been really interesting, I think, because there's mechanical stuff here that's cool. Like some of the ways that the hacking and the drones and stuff works is really neat. And the decision to like, well, maybe I'm going to just shoot in this one. Maybe I'm going to sneak around and take people out. Maybe I'm going to fly a drone in. The options there stab at sort of an immersive simmy kind of thing. But the problem is that it's wrapped up in like story missions that you're not going to want to play more than once. And so I think like the game has a permadeath and Iron Man mode. The Iron Man mode just means you can't turn permadeath off once you start. The permadeath mode, you can turn it off, but then you can't turn it back on again. Those seem very interesting to me. And I wish they had built a game that was more built around the idea of you have permadeath. So you're trying to like liberate these districts and it's going to take you 20 hours, but you could also lose all your shit and have to start over. And here's 10 different difficulties to try it on. That could have been really interesting. Instead, they built another Ubisoft open world game with a shitty story. I feel it is so far anyway. And like you said, mile wide, inch deep. So I don't know.
It sounds completely unappealing to me in that like any character you're playing, like you don't care about ultimately. Like your connection to that character is a couple lines of text.
You'll only care about them as much as you like make yourself care about them. I mean, you'll care about them as much as you care about your XCOM characters, but XCOM's a better game, so it's easier to care about those characters. So yeah, that's it. I'll probably keep playing it some because I do want to see more of the story, because I'm interested to see the ways in which it tries to tackle this weird, like, anti-fascism, but also we're a major video game corporation and we're really bad at understanding anti-fascism that they clearly have exhibited in every other game they have ever made.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
so
one question I have about Watch Dogs Legion, because what even put it on my radar was that, you know, we had the co-optation of revolutionary imagery and coalitional activities, and the fantasy here was that you would actually get, or maybe some kind of simulation of friction, like you actually do have to work to recruit people, not just, you know, do one fetch quest or 3 fetch quests or choose the right dialogue option, but like it's a little more crunchy than that. And from what I'm getting, that's not the case. So I'm curious as to know what the recruitment process is, if any of the hard work that goes into coalition building and revolutionary politics and anti-fascist movements, if any of that made it in, or if it's just all red washing, if you will.
So I haven't done a lot. There are recruitment mechanics that I haven't encountered yet, so I don't have a full picture of that. Largely, the way that it is portrayed is in character's bio, they have some line that's like the reason why maybe they might want to join DedSec. It's like their brother's in jail, like their brother was arrested unjustly, or they one time the police shot at them, and when they didn't do anything wrong, like things like that are sort of their like moment of like, oh, this is oppressive, this is wrong, I should fight against it. And typically, hilariously, your opening character, they're like, here's some people that might want to join DedSec. And then you just pick them from a menu, and then you're warped into them, and they're like, I want to join DedSec. And then then it's like they get a phone call, and then they're like, okay, I'll go there. It's bad. But when it comes to recruiting other characters, it is largely like, it is a fetch quest, but it is at least narratively couched in you doing something significant for them, even though gameplay wise, it's like, go here, sneak by some guards and get a MacGuffin. They clearly have, it's like they understand that coalition building and recruitment in activist movements is difficult, but they also don't understand how difficult or the mechanics of actually doing that in real life. So I think it could be worse for sure, but it also could be a lot better. And that's true of, so far, a lot of the narrative tropes that it leans on. I was extremely concerned at first when I heard that it potentially leans on the concept of like good protester versus bad protester, in that you're this hacker group, and the way they set it up is there's like 0 Day, and they're the bad hackers that will do anything, and they're the ones who blew up a bunch of bombs around the city and blamed it on you, and now you've been outlawed and no one believes you and stuff. It's pretty clear from early on that 0 Day is going to end up being like the head of the private security force that comes in to be the new police force. That seems very thinly veiled. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's more interesting and complex than that. But that kind of dispelled those fears, because it became clear that it's not going to be a good protester versus bad protester thing. It's going to be a conspiracy theory narrative, which is fine. I mean, and not necessarily conspiracy theory in the harmful way, but just in the like X-Files way. And, you know, they are at least willing to say like the police are bad. That's more courage than I've seen from most AAA video games. Yeah. But I mean,
honestly, I wouldn't expect most AAA studios to be, you know, that upfront about it. But
yeah, I mean, and I should walk that back a little bit. They're not saying
right. They're not saying it explicitly,
which is what I would say. They're saying that police in this context are bad and doing bad things, which is, and it's a little more explicitly a police force than you get in something like I don't know. I was going to say Half-Life, except Half-Life does better than Watch Dogs Legion. So Half-Life is another example of a very good of anti-fascism done fairly well.
I was thinking of Half-Life 1, and I'm like, wait, where? But
No,
you're talking
I mean,
about like Half-Life 2. Yeah, combat.
Half-Life 2
etc.
for sure.
Watch Dogs is not as good as Half-Life 2.
Wow.
Well,
Wow.
okay.
That's a
There I
pretty
Okay.
bold
Whoa.
statement.
Whoa. Hold on, you know.
I thought, wow, geez. I thought that's what we were getting set up for, that it was better.
Watch Dogs isn't as good as one of the greatest games of all time. Oh no.
It sounds
Yeah.
okay.
It is.
Yeah,
I think
I'm vaguely interested in checking it out, but I don't know if I'm necessarily like full price checking it out.
no,
I've
I
got
would
a-
not pay full price for this game. I mean, I don't like to veer into purchase advice because that's just not my goal as a critic, really. However, I would say this is not you should not spend $60 on this video game.
Yeah.
I have a free copy of this game, but I
sort
still don't.
of.
I still don't want to play it.
I should have been given a
This is-
copy of this game, but
Do you want
I
my
think you're a
code?
coward.
You should try Alex.
I don't know if
Yeah.
I don't know if I could. I can try it.
I'll send you my. I'll send you my code.
This is fucking wild. So we were talking about it and in our chat, and Alex was like, I have a free code that I got with my video card. And I was like, well, I'm going to check it out, but I don't want to basically, I didn't want to feel like I had to play through the whole thing. So I was very much couching it as like, please don't give it to me unless you literally have no one else to give it to. And so, but then Alex ended up sending it to me. You had to enter it through the NVIDIA GeForce Experience instead of through like Steam or whatever. And then it checked your video card, and the code only redeems if you have a 3000 series card.
Yeah.
It might do it only for the 3080 and 3090 because
It's possible.
the
At
new
that point-
promo is for Black Ops Cold War, and that is only for the 3080 and 3090, even though the 3070 just came out.
That's right. I played some Zork this week too. Forgot
What?
about that.
How did we
What?
what?
Huh?
You said
Why?
Black Ops Cold War
Oh,
because
text
there
adventure?
was
yeah.
yes, there's currently an ARG for
Okay.
Cold War that has been solved at this point. But if you
Huh.
play Zork for like a half hour and do a few things, you get a bunch of shit for Cold War. Which again, horrible
Sure.
politics, but my friends and I, it's our chill out game, so we're gonna play it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I played like a half hour Zork.
I've
Zork
sent the
rules.
code. I've sent the code over to Andre. We'll see what happens.
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
I'll
we can
try
move
and
on.
redeem right now.
The
Yeah,
best
not right
game I
now.
played this week was Zork.
Cool.
Oh, okay. Well, with that bombshell, Jeff, how about you tell us about Spain and Catholicism?
Yeah.
This is going to I want you to know before you start, and I won't spoil what you're about to tell us about. I can tell you though that this is going to derail my plans for video games for the rest of the weekend, because I have been wanting to squeeze this one in for like a year now.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah. No.
Oh, yeah.
It's a lot of fun. And I'm going to start with just some general comments about the sort of top layer, and then we'll dig deeper. It'll be like a layer cake. So
Like a tall pie.
Blasphemous. Yeah. Oh.
No, because that's only one layer. And it's all
Just like
apples.
one disgusting layer.
Apples that look like Cheez-Its. So Blasphemous.
Put Cheez-Its in an apple pie, don't they? Is that a thing? I don't know.
People
People
put
put cheese
on
on pie.
apple pie.
Yeah. Like American cheese.
This is gonna be gore all over
Sorry.
again.
Sorry, please. Continue. Blasphemous. I've heard a lot of really good things about it.
Yeah. So Blasphemous is a Metroidvania with some Soulsborne influences steeped in Spanish Catholic imagery and metaphysics. In other words, it's the most screwed up game of Sorry, where you kill the Pope at the end because you're pretty mad at him. On the surface, it's a really visually striking, sprite-driven platformer RPG with an extremely punishing difficulty that doesn't quite stray over the line into I'm going to throw the controller at the wall or anything like that. It's also replete with a soundtrack by Carlos Viola, which sounds like what would happen if Godspeed You Black Emperor recorded an album in Alhambra after slamming down some vermouth, chowing down on entirely too much tapas. None of that is a dig, by the way. It's just a signal that I can't provide any kind of pretense of impartiality when it comes to the soundtrack, because to paraphrase the legendary Junji Ito, this soundtrack was made for me. So much of the game has these huge layers of meaning and significance, and the reason why I'm here today is because I think a lot of American players are going to miss out on this, and I wanted to sort of clue them in a little bit. So I'm here to talk about the art, the background politics informing the game, and why everybody has pointy hats that may give you the shivers. So for those of you who are just looking for a recommendation here, go play it. It's worth it. Do it. It's a lot of fun. Also, not to begrudge the performances of the English voice cast. I'm sure they did a good job. Well, they kind of did a good job. It's not really the actor's fault, it's the direction. But you really ought to listen to the dialogue in Castilian Spanish, even if you don't know Spanish. If you do know Spanish, it adds the dimensions of sort of emotional valence that otherwise aren't there. And if you don't know Spanish, it creates a sense of place that it just doesn't really happen with the English dialogue as much, at least I found. Again, soundtrack seriously rips. The plot extremely briefly, and I am condensing deeply here. A suffering penitent boy's prayer is answered, and El Milagro Doloroso, or the grievous miracle, as it's called, is summoned into being. This miracle physically externalizes everyone's grace and everyone's sin. People warp and change physically and mentally according to their grace and sin, according to their moral character, as they're judged by this mysterious miracle. You, the player character, are a member of Brotherhood, the Brotherhood of the Silent Sorrow, who is this whole brotherhood has been excommunicated and exterminated practically by the Church of Custodia, which is the land this takes place in. For reasons that are better explained in the comic book, by the way, there's a comic book. It's pretty cool.
Wait, sorry. One comic book or like a series?
It's just a limited run, like I think a 2-issue comic book. But it's still pretty cool. You've been bestowed a sword, a very special sword, mea culpa, and you got to go enact the miracle's will, which is probably go kill the Pope, His Holiness Escobar. So that's like a very brief top, like I'm glossing a lot. There's a lot more there. There's a lot of lore chunkiness that you get like with Dark Souls or Dandara or something like that. So the first thing I'll touch on is the art, because that's usually the thing that kind of smacks you in the face about this game. This game is visually just evocative. And this is absolutely intentional. It's steeped in Spanish art history, as well as an art movement from the early 1900s called Dada. Very briefly, Dada originated in Zurich, Switzerland, considered to be an influence of the Surrealist movement, popularized, of course, by Salvador Dali, another Spaniard. It's primarily about the formation and reappropriation of images in order to disrupt calcified orders, as well as express latent or unheard traumas that were present during the rise of fascism in Europe. Historical examples, if you want to check out Dada for any listeners, might be Max Ernst, E-R-N-S-T, Un Semaine de Bonté, A Week of Kindness. So if you just search Week of Kindness, or just Birdmen, you'll find Max Ernst. More to the point, though, while the Dada element of the game's aesthetic is in the trauma-laden aspects, there's a lot of deep trauma here. It's a hallmark of Spanish Catholic art, where, you know, in the Germanic depictions of Jesus, you get this sort of, you know, very noble Jesus and what have you, and in Spanish Catholic art, like, Jesus is like tortured. It's a whole thing, and there's a long, like, centuries of history of portraiture and religious art that kind of depict this, and this is absolutely in this game. But all that being said, most of the game's sensibilities in terms of color, form, composition, they just come from one dude, Francisco de Goya. So for those of you, quick art history lesson, Goya, sometimes referred to as the last of the old masters or the first of the moderns. He was a romantic painter who had portraiture down pat, but also painted some of the most disturbing works of the period. And they're still unsettling today. Probably his most famous one that most folks I'm thinking would know is Saturn Devouring His Son, wherein a huge dude who looks like Dee Snider without makeup just noms a smaller dude like he's the worst Cookie Monster possible.
Oh, man. We're not going to take it.
And well, I bet he's going to take it right into his mouth. Relevant to Blasphemous, though, Goya painted a work called A Procession of Flagellants, which was part of a larger series that illustrated traditions within Spain that more liberal-minded folks like Goya wanted to resist, mock, and abolish. Now, describing paintings over a podcast is like a fool's errand here. So Google A Procession of Flagellants, and you'll see what I mean. But more to the point, it depicts flagellants in their traditional capirotes, or pointed hoods, which brings me to the next point, a brief tangent about clothes, which is relevant to the game for Americans. So, you might wonder, when you first see the main character, El Penitente, where you're like, those costumes, those character designs, they seem reminiscent of something. So here's a fun story. Spain has a tradition going back to at least the 17th century for dressing up for Holy Week. Before then, the capirote was associated with the Inquisition as a way to allude to whatever crimes a person was accused of. Flagellants or penitents would dress up and perform public penance for their sins wearing the capirote and flowy robes, which were usually white with some color splashed on it. Everything was very relatively copacetic until a dude by the name of William J. Simmons needed a particular uniform for his political organization. How he came to this decision is a bit apocryphal. Some say he was inspired by a film by D.W. Griffith called Birth of a Nation, while others tie it to a folk tradition. But the upshot here is that Simmons appropriated the Spanish mode of penitent dress for Holy Week to form the uniform of the Ku Klux Klan.
Sick.
And the moral and creative bankruptcy of the Klan cannot be overstated. But I digress. The point here is that the game's character design will probably look alarming to many Americans, but realize it's not actually connected to the Klan. It's connected to the traditions of the Spanish Catholic Church, which for many may not be a comfort.
But it is at least interesting versus I have no interest in engaging with any media that is associated with the Klan except for that part in The Sinking City where you get to shoot a lot of them.
It's true. It's wonderful. So that's actually my favorite part of Red Dead 2. Like stumbling on them and like, yes.
or watching Black Klansman and watching that all fall apart. Anyways.
Right.
That's a good movie, but also there's that part where they're watching Birth of a Nation and you're like, I hate those.
Yeah, very much.
Oh yeah, no, it's fucking hot entree. Yeah, that's a good approximation of Goya's Saturn Devouring His Son, except it's Michelangelo with a pizza slice. I'm gonna see that when I close my eyes tonight. La Cowabunga.
There's the episode title.
Thank you. You'll have to send me that image, Andre, please.
Okay.
Thanks.
So the idea that the Spanish Catholic Church might not be comforting here brings us to the next point, necessary to understand Blasphemous in a deeper way. Blasphemous is informed by a particular political discursive space, which can be summed up in a name, La Leyenda Negra de España, or the Black Legend of Spain. This is a hugely controversial topic in Spain, or countries that were or are colonized by Spain. So please note that while my information does come from scholarly sources, again, I can always provide sources there, I'm going to have some epistemic limitations here because I wasn't born in Spain. So what is it? Well, it can be summed up, the Black Legend can be summed up as a project of anti-Spanish and anti-Catholic political messaging, wherein Spain's Northern European rivals demonize the Spanish Empire, its people, its discoveries, achievements, you name it. It's been described by ethnohistorian Charles Gibson as the accumulated tradition of propaganda and Hispanophobia, according to which the Spanish Empire is regarded as cruel, bigoted, degenerate, exploitative, self-righteous, in excess of reality.
And sorry,
so here's where it gets complicated, though. Yeah.
For context, what era was that particular bit happening in, more or less?
The Black Legend really kicked off around the depends on who you ask. So I cite an example here that's as early as the 16th century.
Okay.
And then continues all the way forward. But it's complicated, right? So on one hand, the Black Legend stain is pretty well deserved. Between the conquistadores like Hernan Cortés, Pizarro, the doctrine of terra nullius endorsed by the church, the deliberate spreading of old world diseases, the stealing of land, the comprehensive genocides, plural. Spain, along with the other colonizing powers of Europe, like in England and Belgium, are absolutely guilty of profound atrocities. But on the other hand, there seems to be evidence that other European powers really did try to use disinformation and propaganda to disrupt the Spanish Empire through casting them as the worst thing ever. Of note, most of these accusations were super anti-Semitic and racist, which, by the way, keep in mind, the land which we call Spain was held by emirates and caliphates from the Abbasid and Umayyad dynasties for a really long time. Perhaps the most famous character in this line of thinking is the dude who popularized angry comment sections since 1517, Martin Luther, who said some pretty nasty things about both Jewish folk and Spanish folk, which I won't repeat here. Unfortunately, a lot of contemporary defenses of Spain against the Black Legend seem to have the implicit or explicit premise of, well, like the Spanish Empire was pretty cool, guys. Or it's like an extended tu quoque, like you did it first, fallacy, which doesn't really work. But circling back around, I promise this does actually relate. One notable critic of Spanish culture who contributed to the Black Legend, albeit perhaps unintentionally, was none other than Francisco Goya, specifically with the painting series that involves a procession of flagellants, which is the painting that inspired Blasphemous. Blasphemous is a game that elaborates on a picture of deeply Spanish metaphysics and culture, and it has roots in the Black Legend in both plot, imagery, song, and design. So what is Blasphemous when we take all this into account? What does all this information do for us? Well, first, it makes it, in my opinion, a rarity in modern action RPGs. It's steeped in a specific art history and political tradition. In some ways, there's something similar happening with a sense of origin in Blasphemous that's happening in Pathologic 2, though I will also be quick to point out that Pathologic 2 has a much more progressive political undercurrent to it. Second, I think the game's meaning shifts a bit. You are pictured as detritus at the beginning, bare life that has been thrown into this very evocative flesh heap. The body which has been thrown away ends up fighting forward anyway. You end up helping the kissers of wounds, or perhaps vanquishing the monstrous agents of the church with such colorful names as Cristanta of the Rapt Agony, Exposito, Scion of Abjuration, or Our Lady of the Blackened Face. In other words, El Penitente, the penitent one, is not merely another flagellant in the service to an order gone rampant. El Penitente could be seen as an extension of the desperate torment of those so deeply imbricated in the system who still must resist, who work to overthrow it, who endure their own song of guilt in order to drown out a perverse symphony. In still other words, the Dada impulse of resistance and disruption through targeted appropriation, in El Penitente's case, the appropriation of a proper pilgrimage, which is basically what the game is, utilizes the force of trauma to wield a blade against an unjust order. But all of that being said, it could just be a game filled with anime bullshit and weird Catholic stuff. So that could be the case. But
an Evangelion game.
Oh God.
Except without the Freudian schema or the weird attachment to a strange interpretation of Kabbalah.
So When it comes to Blasphemous, is it contextualizing any of the above in any way, or is it just kind of assuming that you have this inherent knowledge?
It doesn't go into great depth. Like the Black Legend is never actually talked about in game.
Right.
That is all like external research. But it does bring in a lot of specifically the culture of Seville, or Seville, where the ways that the Spanish Catholic Church has sort of manifested in its emphasis, which is to say on penitence, especially penitence, on the sort of visceral feeling of guilt, of sin, and what that does to the body. So there's all these sort of little clues that if you know the history, it's like, oh, I get it. And if you don't know the history, it's not like you're just locked out of the game and you're like, I don't understand anything that's going on. It's more like, this seems really fucked up. What's happening? What is going on?
I would be so interested to know just how intentional that is, you know?
Right.
Like I would be so interested to know if the developers were fans of Goya's artwork and had a cursory knowledge of the things that you're describing and then made a really fucking cool looking game out of it, or if there was a deeper desire to explore these themes. You know, like it's just, and I'm not taking anything away from them either way. But what I find so fascinating about this game, and I'm really glad I waited to play it until having that education, because it's a lot of stuff that I didn't know, is like, I've wanted to play it for a long time because I find the Spanish Catholic imagery, you know, I'm at least familiar with Goya and Goya's works, and the Procession of the Flagellants and stuff. So I was immediately taken by the game's art style, but I think it's interesting that like there's all of this potentially interesting either way, because if you know this, there's interpretations there regardless of how intentional it is on the part of the developers. But it's also a game, I'm looking at the Steam page right now, I already own it. I've owned it for like a year and not installed it and played it, but there's stuff on the Steam page like brutal combat, release the power of the mea culpa, a sword born from guilt itself to slaughter your foes, acquire devastating new combos and special moves as you purge all in your path. And you read that kind of stuff and it's like it's interesting and cool. This is not a criticism that we're at a place with game development that it could be perhaps stabbing at these really deep and complex historical themes. And also that's the marketing on the Steam page for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it's very exciting to me that there is the potential for that, because I think that in the past games, we talked about Half-Life 2 and its anti-fascist themes. Half-Life 2 is a game that I remember blew the doors off of what a game story could be to me when it came out, because it was that like, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. It was that like, this is a fucking awesome sci-fi shooter. And also that I can say like, oh, this part in the game is so cool. And then also it has really for the time, deep ruminations on these ideas of colonization and conquest and fascism, that were pretty heady for video games when that game came out. So I think it's interesting to see a game like Blasphemous that is perhaps not at the quality level of Half-Life 2. I haven't played it, I don't know. But it's the way it's marketed is as this like brutal, gory, bloody, violent action RPG that's like hard and all about like mastering combos and stuff, but it might actually have all of this kind of hidden depth from a narrative perspective is very cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to answer your question more completely, I'm looking at their Kickstarter. Kickstarter's different. And they literally have Procession of the Flagellants on their artistic inspiration here. And they said, we've set ourselves an artistic challenge. Can we create a dark fantasy world that is universally appealing, but also deeply inspired by the most meaningful icons of our local folklore? And then bring up the city.
Oh, that's really cool.
That's great. That's even more exciting to know then, because I also think just on a purely aesthetic level, not getting deep at all, the fucking the gif of the character, the animated gif of the character putting on the Helm of Penitence and the gushing blood is like one of my favorite things aesthetically to come out of a video game in maybe the last decade.
Yeah,
I have been
like-
using that gif as a reaction image with a specific group of friends who also, one of whom really likes this game, as since like before the game came out, just like time to go to work.
Right. And what's interesting about the cutscenes is that it's a throwback to a style of cutscene I've not seen in a minute. Does anyone here remember the old Out of This World game from the early 90s?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Except more detailed. It's not quite, there's this weird blocky polar bear guy.
Aw.
But yeah, no, it's very stirring, and there's actually, you know what? Here's a selling point. You can pet the dog. There's a dog.
All right.
It's a friendly dog. You can pet it, and it wags its tail, and it's your friend.
Cool.
The only other question that I have, that this is very specific, but and just a little bit silly, but is also interesting. When I was first looking at the game and thinking about playing it, one of the reasons I didn't just jump on it when it came out is because some of the boss designs, in particular Esposito's Scion of Abjuration, looked like they were almost just going for the sort of shock value of like trying to make you uncomfortable purely through the art. Do you feel that there is a consistency, an artistic consistency across like enemy designs and stuff that feels like tied to the narrative and doesn't just do that, isn't just like this is a disturbing image?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I found there to be a thematic consistency.
Okay.
If only because Exposito's narrative.
Exposito, sorry, yeah, it's not Esposito.
Yeah, you're good. So Exposito, he's a little hard to like get the narrative out of because you're trying to collect a bunch of stuff.
It's certainly not a spoiler to describe to you if it's on the Steam page. That's how I saw it. It's basically like this almost wicker looking enemy holding an enormous baby that is crying blood with its eyes wrapped.
And
so
the thing you actually attack isn't that.
Okay.
It's a snake with a woman's head.
yeah, I see that here as well. It's a little left. Yeah.
Yep. That's a pain in the ass boss. But the lore, there is lore there. There's a boss that there's a lot of tree imagery. Actually, there's a lot of wood. Wood is a huge theme in Blasphemous. And it's something that wood, gold, wicker, weaving, things like that. So I found the bosses to track pretty well.
Cool.
Like they're not just shock value for the sake of shock value. There's a purpose. You kind of have to dig for it a little bit.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah,
and it's really it's not even a like I'm not going to play it if this isn't there. But it's something like when you look at like and it's a game that I haven't finished. I'm hoping to finish it on the PlayStation 5. But when you look at like the Cleric Beast in Bloodborne, that's a very disturbing image. But it also, in context, the approach to it, the fight itself, and what comes after feels really, really consistent and like thematically kind of relevant to the world and stuff. And it's hard to get a sense for that with some of the just like screen grabs of boss fights that are in the marketing material. So I was just curious. I'm going to play it either way, but I was interested to hear your thoughts on that. Aspect.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It also has a surprising amount of hidden quests and that you can absolutely miss and mess up.
And they apparently just released a big update for it too, called Stir of Dawn. I don't know, maybe this may have been before you played it. I don't know how recent this update is, but it adds like systems and new story content, a new game plus, like all kinds of stuff. So it sounds like to some extent they are supporting it still, which is cool to see.
Yeah, no, I highly support Game Kitchen, which are the developers who made this. They did also The Last Door, point and click horror adventure, which you would probably really get a kick
I haven't played through it, but I am familiar. I've played a little bit of it. That was like, it was originally like online. Yeah, yes. This is a game that was originally browser. You could play it in a browser. And I've always meant to go back and play through it because I played it before it was finished. There was like a demo of it in a browser. So, yeah.
Right. Exactly. So, yeah. Yeah, I think probably the other comment I have about Blasphemous, and maybe the question I have for you all, because I got to do the teacher thing a little bit, and then I'll let everybody go, is what game have you played that where the aesthetic didn't just grab you, but it really, like, you felt it in your gut? I think that's the best way I can describe it, where you're basically, it's like you were hit with watching the imagery.
I have,
if that makes
one.
sense. I can also clarify this if needed.
Yeah, one that stood out to me recently, and in very much the same way, in that if you steep yourself in the language and the scenario that it has set up, as well as the visual fidelity, is a game from Asobo Studios, the makers of Microsoft Flight Sim and also The Crew 2, which was...
They worked on The Crew 2. They were not the makers of The Crew 2.
I know, they were on it, but
I have to always point that out.
Was Plague Tale, the one set in revolutionary France.
My partner and I want to play that so bad. I have it sitting on my Xbox. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's very similar to this in that, like, it doesn't contextualize the French Revolution and whatever. Like, it doesn't contextualize everything, or like the plague, I should say. Sorry, like the Black Plague and all that junk. It doesn't contextualize it. It just, you're just kind of thrown into that world, assuming you understand it. And if you don't understand it, it's probably fine. I played through the entire game in French, but French is also my native language. So I didn't, like, it was actually really interesting playing it that way. I would be interested in hearing how it is for someone who does not speak French, and just listening to the French voice acting, because it's very good.
Well,
and
we would
emotional.
definitely play it in French with subtitles. So I will let you know.
So yeah, that aesthetic, it was, up until the last couple hours, I would say it was very evocative of what it would actually be like if you were in that scenario. The last few hours I wasn't as fond of, because it went very fantastical. Like it broke away from anything that you would actually see in reality, and that kind of broke it for me. But up until that point, like when you're walking around in a moody like cityscape with all the doors with red X's painted on them with a torch, and you're just like, there's no natural or no artificial light, the only light is coming from your torch, and you're looking around these areas and there's like rats scuttling around, like that's pretty effective. So yeah, Plague Tale: Innocence is definitely the one that comes to mind for me.
Nice. What do you think, Allison?
I'm still thinking about it. Maybe pass.
Andre?
Yeah, it's like a difficult thing. Like, off the top of my head, Sayonara Wild Hearts. Like, when I saw that trailer, like, I was just very into the art and like that aesthetic, and like that is the kind of music I'm into lately, is like the more poppy, ethereal pop kind of stuff, which was like really great. I saw that and I was like, holy shit, why did no one tell me about this in the thing? Because I was asleep during the Nintendo Direct, and it was like, you know, everyone was chatting about it, and I read through and I was like, okay, and then I watched it later. I was like, oh my god, I need to play this. And then it's not out, but it's like a thing that just always gets me, is like Pacific Northwest, or like specifically Oregon, like aesthetic stuff. And Lake, which is coming out supposedly Q1 2021. You're you're a lady visiting a town in Oregon. I think it's a fictional town, Providence Oaks, and you're like being a mail carrier for 2 weeks. And like, I think there's like a murder or something, and you're like trying to solve it, I guess. I don't know. You're just like going around doing mail stuff, and like, I watched the trailer and like I had tears in my eyes. Part of that is like homesickness, but like seeing the trailer for what was it? Days Gone. Like I'm like, oh, yep, okay, those forests. I like they're like fictionalized, but like I know those forests. I know that look. And then like same with games like Life is Strange 2. That was also a thing. Like, okay, I've been to like these kinds of areas. So anything like in that kind of vein always gets me.
Nice. Pat, what you got?
So I have a few, I won't talk for 20 minutes, but so that Allison has a little bit more breathing room. I have a few quick hit answers and then a couple that are more impactful. But I would say when I first played Brutal Legend, that was one that I was like, as a fun kind of fun, really though, like as a fun one, that was one of the first times that I felt like a video game didn't just do a fantasy or sci-fi aesthetic and also really like spoke to me. I remember the like playing that game's opening sequences and the way that it uses like its soundtrack and the aesthetics of heavy metal album covers. It was just so clear that they got it. It wasn't a joke to them. It wasn't a gimmick, but also they got the absurdity of like a fucking throne of skulls on the cover of an Ozzy Osbourne album or whatever. Like it was so cool the way that they got like, because heavy metal is so like, people who are big fans of heavy metal know what parts of it are silly and what parts of it are serious. Yeah. But you still kind of ride this blurred line between it, where if you're a big fan, you take some of the silly stuff a little more seriously, even though you understand why people outside of that scene don't get it as much and think it's funny. So that was cool.
Like a Dio album cover.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. When I see Dio album covers, I genuinely love them, but I understand why some people think they can be stupid. And clearly Brutal Legend got that. Dark Souls, huge in terms of like, it's my favorite style of fantasy art is the dark, the low fantasy that those games specifically evoke, which is also a big part of why I am so excited to play Blasphemous, because there's a little bit of crossover there. Pathologic 1, way back when I first found out about it, it is not a pretty game. It's very ugly in terms of its technical, visual, and art design. But the crushing weight of that game's aesthetic and art style, which is true of Pathologic 2 as well, I just experienced it first in the first game, is fascinating. And it's like, don't play that game in 2020. I'm planning to play it before the end of the year, but it is a deeply disturbing, upsetting and challenging thing to play, and I don't mean from a difficulty perspective. But then the two that are or the few that are really big for me, the first time I saw the No Man's Sky trailer, obviously the shipped game, it only now kind of truly evokes that trailer after years of work. But the first time I saw the No Man's Sky trailer, I just about cried, because it combined 65 Days of Static as a band that I already really liked, and that kind of post-rock sound put together with what is, I mean, sort of hard science fiction is one of my favorite aesthetics. You know, the 70s book cover, which Sean Murray specifically cited as the inspiration for the art in No Man's Sky. And so to see all that laid out with that kind of music and the possibility space there was really impactful to me. I would say most recent example, Control, definitely hit me that way, in a way that I didn't expect, because I didn't understand how much I love brutalism until I played Control. That was like the switch that made me go, wait a minute, this is why I always thought the FBI building was the coolest building in Washington, D.C., even though it's ugly.
Brutalism and Will Scarlet from Robin Hood Men in Tights.
But I think probably the most visceral reaction I've had purely based on aesthetic to a game ever, which ties into Control, is in Alan Wake. There is a moment at the end of, I think it's like the second episode. At this point, the game has been established as a amalgam of Twin Peaks and Stephen King, and even other kind of more disparate horror themes, which is already a thing that I really dig. And then there is the moment where I forget the name of the character, but she makes the phone call at the end of the second episode, and then it starts playing Poe's Haunted, which is one of my favorite songs of all time. And no one knows that song. Like, I think people on this podcast maybe, but for the most part, Poe is like this forgotten relic. Like sometimes like a signpost in the desert, somebody mentions Poe and I'm like, yeah, Poe
Yeah, the guy who wrote
ruled.
the guy who wrote House of Leaves, his sister.
Yeah, exactly. So to hear that song play after a moment that was so deeply like my kind of weird horror stuff, and the sort of Twin Peaks, it was a very Twin Peaks moment combined with that song, was like it got my blood pumping so hard. And it was really, really, really a really, really cool moment. I've had more emotional moments with games before, but from a purely aesthetic perspective, I think that's the one that hit me the hardest.
I've just been thinking about Alan Wake. Was it Rose that made the phone call?
It's she calls from the like cabins, and like Barry is calling to set something up, and the reveal is that the woman, the writer's wife, who's like the like apparition, is behind her and kind of is like possessing her, or controlling her. That's the moment, and then the Poe song plays.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's Rose. Anyways, cool.
So Allison, what you got?
Yes. All right. So I actually figured it out. So because I was really kind of stuck on the kind of things that are familiar to you in real life, which I don't know if I've really had that much. But one of the things that really influenced me, just like kind of my aesthetic style and my aesthetic things that I like, are Studio Ghibli movies. Like I saw Spirited Away in theaters when I was like 11, I think. And then after that, I was like immediately hooked and went and watched every single movie I could get my hands on and watched pretty much everything and loved it around that age, and it was really formative. So the two ones that come to that are obviously Ni no Kuni, which I still haven't played that much of. Like I've played a little bit of it, but I haven't really dug deep into it. But just seeing that aesthetic art style in a game the first time I saw it was just like, I don't know. It felt very much like, oh, you can play as in a movie. And the other one that's a little bit less direct, but still kind of gave me that same vibes, was the original Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild trailer, which just like something about the music and the kind of nature aesthetic just gave me like just these really great vibes of that. So that's something that always, if something is kind of Studio Ghibli reminiscent in any way, it'll just make me go like, yes, please, take my money.
Right. No, that makes sense. Awesome. Thank you everyone for sharing. Sorry for taking up a little bit more time, Andre, but at the same time, like,
it's interesting.
Well, it's good.
It's one of those things where like being aware of what can viscerally pull at you can like also like change the way that we engage with media, right?
Totally.
And like the more that we're aware of that, like in my case, I'm a huge sucker for Spanish culture. Like I anytime you put anything Andalusian, I'm like, okay, let's go. Sign me up. Have my money.
It's interesting to find like those kind of little pressure points, and then also when you do get them pushed, it's just super exciting. Like for me, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily aesthetic, although I love the aesthetics of the game, but continuing my Hades love of 2020, just like I grew up, Greek mythology was like so huge to me growing up. I feel like I've probably talked about this before, but there was a good chunk of my childhood where I literally listened to Greek mythology tapes falling asleep every single night. So it's just like viscerally being like, it's that guy. I know who you are. Oh boy, it's I'm sure ready. And like having something that's like so directly, not just like taking the aesthetic of it, but taking the actual stories and actual characterizations and everything, and just kind of like going deep on it was just really super exciting for me, and still kind of is thrilling whenever I pick it up. And
I kind of only didn't list any Supergiant games on when I was talking because they've kind of damned themselves to a degree, because I think they are perhaps one of the most impressive studios from an aesthetic and art direction standpoint.
Oh yeah. Oh
That
totally.
exists ever in the history of games. So
The artwork for like the promo or like the main artwork for Transistor is like maybe my favorite piece of game
Oh, that's so
art
good.
ever.
what's funny is that while I certainly feel an emotional connection to pretty much all of their art, I don't have that like gut punch reaction to it simply because I kind of expect it. Like
Yeah, and
they always meet or exceed my expectations, but it's when I saw the Hades art, I was like, that's fucking rad. But I also, when I saw the Supergiant logo, expected to be blown away by something, you
I
know,
feel
so
like,
it didn't
though-
have that emotional like gut punch that you were asking about. It's just amazing.
yeah, no, I think that I get that. I aesthetically, I don't know if I get it always, but it's like I feel like definitely some of the music and some of the
Which I'm sort of considering as part of
Right.
the aesthetic, you know.
yeah, and like just the so really I feel like the biggest gut punch from Supergiant might have been the first time I played Bastion, because
Sure, right.
you're not expecting it, and
Yeah.
then you have the narrator, and it's just aesthetically, you have this music, you have the narrator who is just like legendary, and I played a little bit of Bastion a while ago because I was like so into Hades that I'm like, I should just play some other game. Let's just play another Supergiant game.
Yeah. Well, and Darren's my favorite composer in games right now.
Yeah.
so,
Oh, and like, there was a Supergiant posted a video on their Twitter of the voice actor who is, among other things, the narrator in Bastion, but he's basically been in
Logan.
every single Supergiant game.
Yeah, Logan
And-
Cunningham.
Yeah.
Yes, and it was like, dude, you're such a talent.
he is. It's so
You're
funny
amazing.
in person. I haven't met him, but I was fortunate enough to attend their 10 years of Supergiant at PAX a couple of years ago, or last year, I guess it was. That Daniel Dwyer hosted, and they were all. It was like Gen Z was there, Greg Kasavin was there, Logan was there. There were a couple other people were there. Aram was there, I think, and Logan's funny because he's simultaneously like seems very approachable and is also like super imposing at the same time. Like not imposing, like not on purpose. I think he seemed extremely nice on the panel, but he also is such like a like force in the room. that
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
like,
I bet.
it's like I really want to go talk to that person because they seem very warm and friendly, but also I really need to get it together before I do, because he's also like just sort of a monolithic figure in the room as well. He's a really cool,
Yeah. I mean, I feel like he could just
an astounding talent.
in his like narrator from Bastion voice, and everybody would just be like transfixed,
I mean, he voices Hades, Poseidon, Achilles, Charon, Asterius, and the storyteller.
which is fucking bananas. Because some of those are so different,
Yes.
and you're just like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Anyway, Hades tangent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Hades Tangent is like my subtitle for 2020 in terms of video games. Because, like, honestly, any week that I don't bring up Hades, assume that I played at least a few runs of Hades. Even though I hit the true ending like weeks ago at this point.
I'm
But
going back
I mean, I
to
get
it.
it. You know, sometimes you got to check in with old friends.
Yeah.
good.
And it's just like feels super cozy to play at this point because I've played so much of it. So
And there's still stuff to do. So
right, and there's still stuff
I'm
on it I'm
assuming
unlocking, and there's still stuff where you're like, well, I haven't gotten all of the companions yet. I have nowhere come close to all the fish yet. Considering, oh yeah, there's a fishing mini game in this big game. So yeah, there's a lot. But yeah, that I think that's one of them too. Probably the most visceral experience this year was Hades for sure.
all right. Well, with that, we're getting long. Alex, do you want to talk
Hey.
about Umineko again?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I got to a part in that game that just got fucking buck wild, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to spoil it.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, no, moving on. No, one thing I should say, that game is on sale right now for 50% off, and everyone should buy it because it's extremely good. It's part of the Halloween sale.
I really need to play that soon. especially hearing just the basic stuff about how you're starting to see why people were so excited and over analyzing the new opening to Higurashi. And I'm like, now I'm just like, oh, I gotta know.
Yeah.
Wait, but you have to buy the 2 parts separate. You buy the questions and the answers. That's $30 total.
Yep.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a whole lot of story in there, though.
It should be noted the questions arc took me 68 hours to get through. And I'm currently
either like a something to bring you in or something to make you
Yeah.
The dangerous sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. The dangerous.
The dangerous thing I realized, I had started reading the manga, which is very good. The first volume, well, we won't get into it. There's some stuff with the writing that skeeves me out and I'm fucking sick of, but that's a personal journey I've been going on this year with my anime consumption or anime aesthetic consumption. But generally it's really well done. The art is really great. Most of the writing is really great. But I realized in all of my hemming and hawing about how I would love to play the visual novel, except I want to play it on iPad. It's a visual novel. I could Steam stream it very easily.
Yeah.
Because the Steam Link app for iOS isn't great, but it works totally fine for clicking through a visual novel. So there's really no reason there's no real reason to read the manga over playing the game aside from just the different delivery method. I can use the same device to play both. So I may pick it up. We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd get through it until probably 2022, but
Yeah,
After you've completed the trails of Cold Steel, that's the one.
Yeah.
That'll always be a background thing. there are no illusions there that I'll get through that anytime soon. I have not promised to such. Anything Sam says to the contrary is bullshit. I probably won't play Trails of Cold Steel 1 until 2024.
If then.
If then.
So one thing I'll say about Umineko, and now that I'm relatively close to the end, like I'm about halfway through the answers arc, which probably leaves me with about 30 or 35 hours to go. I don't know. Maybe the last chapter or last episode will be extremely long. Who can say? I find there's 8 episodes is what they're called. And each episode is about 15-ish hours, plus or minus 2, we'll say. And I would say each of those feels like you're reading a book in a series. So if you think of it that way, it's like you're reading an 8-part series with 8 different books. And it just happens to be that these books they have a soundtrack, they have voice acting for every spoken line. They have actually, if you use the PS3 patch, because there was a patch or a PS3 version which had really, really high fidelity art and animations, for the PC version, you can get a patch which puts all those in and like fixes all of the cutscenes and stuff to not have spoilers, because the Steam version does. And things like that. Like, yeah, you're reading a really high fidelity book and a really high fidelity series of books. And by the point I'm at, which is like, yeah, episode 7-ish, it's fucking nuts. Like the narrative just is completely subversive in a way I never would have expected. Even though I know his works, I know what he's capable of. It became a total subversion of tropes from both the mystery genre and the fantasy genre in a way that I was not expecting. And it's really cool. Like, in a non-spoilery way, there is something that's happening on a surface level. Like, with these characters who are interacting one-to-one, they're speaking, there's a murder mystery involved, and they're trying to figure everything out, and like it's freaking them out, it's horror-based and all that, hence why it's in the Halloween sale. And then there's a meta layer above that, and the recent reveal is that there's a meta layer above the meta layer. Which is...
meta layer.
Yeah, it is executed extremely well. And even saying that isn't a spoiler, because once you get there, you'll just be like, what is even happening? In a very good way. So we don't have to talk about Umineko too much longer, because it's still not done. And we've been talking about it for almost a month now.
I do believe the first time you talked about it, you said you wouldn't talk about it every week.
Yeah, but it turns out it's really good, and I think it's up there as maybe my favorite piece of media I've ever consumed. So.
Oh, so you're becoming one of those Umineko people.
I am becoming one of those
One
because
of
I think
those people.
I mean, I don't mean it in a bad way. I just mean that
If you can even call them people.
I don't mean it in a mean way. I just mean it that people who like Umineko really like Umineko.
yeah, they proselytize it from the roofs, and I think I'm almost getting to that point. Like it's nuts.
Alex is considering buying a house just so he can have a roof to stand on.
Exactly. Precisely. So it's worth experiencing, I would say. We can leave that there.
Okay.
I'll check it out.
Well, then we're going to kind of transition into the news. Then you can kind of talk about this thing you wrote
Sure.
because they're intimately linked. So that's it for game talk. And we'll have we're not going to cover all this news, I don't think. It's not enough
Some of it's
hours in the
quick hit anyway.
podcast. Yeah, we'll see. So the main thing that we're going to talk about today is Cyberpunk 2077. It went gold, everybody. It was ready to ship. It's out in like 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks now, right? It's going to be great. No more delays.
Yep.
Except they are delaying it again.
Yep.
Only like 3 weeks or something. Not even
3 more
very
weeks
long.
of overtime, baby.
3 more weeks of crunch.
Yeah. There was
What's
some
3 weeks when
sentiment,
you've been crunching for a year.
or 2, as it may be, on and off. There's some like people, I saw some folks saying that like, oh, this is a good thing because it gives the developers more time so that they can reduce their workload in that time. And it's like, that's not how this works.
No.
They're going to be working those overtime hours until the thing's out, and probably
And they would be
afterwards.
No,
they'd be
that's-
working those hours anyway.
That's a common
Because-
misconception.
Yeah.
When the date comes, it's not like they stop. They keep going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's patches.
Which
There's
is kind of what
patches,
I mean.
there's, after launch
All
support.
this work is on the day 0 patch. I saw some ridiculous thing from somebody on their team, one of their management, talking about Metacritic scores and how they aim for over 90 with all their games. And it's like, it's clear that it's, I love CD Projekt Red games. I'm willing to say it out loud. Like the Witcher series is one of my favorites, but their management is a complete disaster.
There's so much to unpack here.
It's so bad.
The developers learned at the same time that the public did about this delay.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, they basically found out on
True.
Twitter. Some of them.
there
was
an email.
There was an email
at the
as
same
well.
time, but yeah, it was same time. Not even like a heads up. After like the day before, social media being like, no more delays.
Which this
Well,
isn't an excuse for that. It's certainly
No.
not a. I'm not saying that this is that it's okay or good. Clearly, they're aware that there are people there that are talking with folks like Jason Schreier and stuff. And so I'm sure they figured if they sent an email, it would be minutes before that ended up reported on by outside sources. Which just more goes to show how fucked your whole production is if you have to worry about that.
I'm just gonna say, as much as their management sucks, their PR is severely fucking their entire studio.
Oh yeah,
Like severely. Like
I mean,
with the example you gave, Andre, because like you said, oh, no more delays. Like if you go back on their Twitter and look at it, it's like, no delays, no comment. There's like that example everyone cites of, oh, I took time off for the launch of this game. Can you guarantee me there's no more delays so that I'm not taking this time off in vain? And they're like, yeah, no problem. It's coming out that date, like guaranteed, no problem. And that was 12 hours before this delay.
Yeah,
Right.
It's like right before they announced the delay.
You know, the PR person is just like, yeah, the game's coming out because as far as they know, it is. And then suddenly management's like, nah, you gotta tweet this out.
Yeah, but like,
okay.
not to say the person behind it is fucking them. The PR is fucking them. Like, just
right.
like,
And like, if somebody saw that they posted that, there should be somebody going, hey, FYI, maybe don't make promises if you don't know.
Well,
or like just don't make promises.
On the other hand, it did go gold, so
there was stuff from their management claiming that they weren't going to crunch on the project to get some kind of like brownie points, I guess, while they were crunching on the project. Like it was just a lie.
Yeah.
And it's like all the reporting that I have heard that's not specifically related to the labor angle, which is for sure more important, but like they were in pre-pro, they showed that opening announcement teaser, whatever, 6 years ago. It was like before The Witcher 3 came out.
Oh, it was before The Witcher 3 was like announced. That was how they said, hey, we're working on The Witcher 3. This is just what's coming.
Yeah. So like what, 7, 8 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
They basically were in pre-production
like
for. Yeah, they were in pre-production for like 4 to 6 years or something, working stuff out, and basically have been. And this could be wrong. I mean, this could be bad information. So I'm not trying to state this as fact, but from what I've heard, they have basically been crunching on the production part of this game for the past couple of years, and not all of it was made in that time. Obviously, like they didn't just throw it together in 2 years, but like. It has not been inactive. Like it has not been. There was such a long pre-production period that like they're building this massive game in such a short amount of time, and it is obviously going to have an impact on their ability to like produce it on a timeline.
Yeah.
It's bad. I almost am like. I think the key thing to segue to your article, Alex, is. This should be used as a springboard for conversation about the wider problem with game development and labor associated with it, because Cyberpunk is fucked, CDPR is fucked. There's not really much that can be done at this point to save the people working on this specific project.
Right, on this specific game, it's. I mean, there's still a few weeks, but it's like it's pretty much done. Like,
yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
They're not going to change anything to make it better at this point there with that stuff. But I think it should be used as an opportunity to talk about the issue more broadly.
Yeah.
Which Alex wrote an article about.
Yeah, and it's a long article.
Fix.space.
Yeah, I'll make sure to include a link in the show notes. But it is a huge problem, y'all. Like it's not just CDPR.
Right.
No.
And like
it's
they
not just
are not.
CDPR. It's not just Rockstar. It's not just like any of the big studios. It's or like just an individual big studio. It's big studios. It's a lot of little studios too. It's a big problem.
Look at Necro Barista, right? Like in the case of that game's development, you had a team of friends who have more equity. So they're not necessarily deserving of the same kinds of criticism for management harming people working under them because they're more of a collective and more of a flat structure. But they've been open about how much burnout affected that game's development. So it's clearly across the spectrum of from small to large.
Yeah, and it's just inherent to the industry at this point, which is a bad thing. Like it's difficult because how do you fix that when it's like rotten at the root, you know?
Right. And might I say it's also inherent in capitalism?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I've worked like my previous job, I wasn't a project manager, but I was working kind of in adjacent with project management and basically specifically assigning resources and doing it. And there were times I had to ask people to work late, and it was solely because we didn't have the resources to do things. Like it was, okay, we don't have enough people based in Europe to do this. So can you do this? Or we don't have enough people based in America who can do this. So, hey, person in France, can you do this like late your time? And it's like, it sucks, but it's like also like, because capitalism, because they understaff because there's just like all these like kind of compounding reasons why people do this. And it's like, I feel like a lot of it kind of comes down to, well, we don't want to have to pay more people to do things. Ergo, people are gonna. Which
I think is valid. And I think it's kind of unrelated to what happens in games because it's not entirely unrelated, but it's not. I mean, it's not also not a one-to-one mapping, I guess.
People want their return on their investment. They need money to come in to fund the studio, and if we need the money now. CD Projekt Red's probably okay with how The Witcher's been doing, but
Right.
and their business as like a storefront. But there comes a point where like you do need to put a thing out, but that's more because of how the economy, capitalism, and stuff have been
And
structured and require like a product to be put out there within some reasonable time frame.
Well, and capitalism has begotten a culture of consumption that demands that CD Projekt put this game out because people demand it. Like, even if you remove the aspect of capital from it, because of that, because of the influence of that structure, we expect like, when's the game going to come out? The game's going to come out, right? The game's coming out now, right? In theory, sort of to points you've brought up, Alex, deadlines should be set because you as a creative team need to set deadlines to be able to put a pin on something rather than to hit a revenue goal.
Sure.
And you can't do that in the culture that we live in because
and I mean also like kind of tying it together too with the people who are taking time off to play Cyberpunk when it comes out and are frustrated that it's delayed. It's like, it's in a capitalist society where a lot of jobs aren't necessarily flexible about days that you can take off.
There's a lot of angles on it for sure.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, there's definitely a lot of angles and it's not just that, but at the same time, like like the more that I think about it, the more I'm like,
Those people can read a book.
Yeah. But like
they can go read a Cyberpunk book, like
right. But I mean, it's
not
just like
Necrobarista. What's the
that
William
adds
Gibson?
like a layer of pressure.
Yeah. But like to your point, Pat, like yes, in general, but specifically for Cyberpunk, they first said April 16th, 2020. Then they said September 17th, then the 19th of November, and then now it's the 10th of December. Like they're the ones that are setting those dates that people are like looking at, like, and they're expecting the thing to come out. So like, I think that's a little bit different than saying like, oh, I'm excited for this thing to come out. I need it to come out right now. Rah.
Let me tell you about the Elden Ring subreddit.
Yeah, fair. And like you have games like The Last Guardian, where like, it was announced a billion years ago, and then finally like people cared about it and like they wanted it to come out, but like they were like, oh, is it going to show up at E3 again? We really want to hear more news about this. And then finally they put a date on it. Like that's what finally sets the final expectation of, oh, now I want this product because I know it's a thing and it will be releasing at this point. Like,
yeah,
I think that does raise a different mentality than just being excited about something and wanting it to come out, I guess. At least for me.
I think they're getting death threats from people.
Yeah, that part is
because they
dumb.
won't release the game. And that stuff, that toxicity is largely bred from the kind of entitlement that comes with the culture of consumption that has developed around and been influenced by capitalism, in my opinion anyway. Because in a better world, we would say, I'm really excited for this piece of art that you're creating, and when you're ready and to give it to me, I can't wait. But take your time and do what you think. Manage the project the way that's best for you and the health of your team and yourself. But we don't do that because they put a date on it, and everyone expects to be able to buy it, and then everyone's like, "Well, I'm giving you money, so you owe me, and I own you because I'm paying you for this product." And
they don't give a shit about your $60.
Yeah. It seems to come from a place of entitlement, but also just a profound lack of understanding of how games are made, which is
or
also
just human empathy
or empathy. But like, that's kind of what the article I wrote tries to address.
Which I think is why it's very effective. Because it does looks very mechanically at the problem. And I appreciate that you took, you took a clear stance of like, hey, this is bad in games, and didn't really leave room for argument against that, but also outlined very mechanically why this stuff happens the way that it does. So I think it's a useful counterpoint, I think, to the reporting that's generally pretty condemnatory without necessarily providing context, which then creates this sort of desire from people, I think, to fight back against that commentary and talk about how, like, almost throw off the notion that crunch is bad, and or that game design crunch in particular is bad, to defend developers who now feel embattled, and it's just not a lot of the way that it's reported on is creates a sort of back and forth dialogue that isn't actually helpful to examining the problem itself.
Yeah.
Not that it shouldn't be reported on either. I'm not saying that, but yeah.
Yeah. It and one fun is a really weird word to use, but an interesting thing that came out of that article was I posted it to the Coding Blocks Slack. Coding Blocks being podcast all about developers and stuff like that. We had Joe Zack. Yeah, we had Joe Zack as a guest at one point. And we were talking about the PS5 and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I talked about it because I've been a part of their Slack for a couple of years now and posted that article. And so many developers came out and talked about crunches they've experienced with their workplace, not in games, some in games. And like, it's been a really interesting dialogue to see because all of the people are saying, yeah, this is the thing that people aren't vocalizing. And it needs to be vocalized at some point because people are getting really aggressive without understanding, like objectively what's happening.
Yeah.
Like they're being fantastical with it almost. They're like, oh, games kind of like you put in quote unquote effort and then they come out. You're not putting in enough effort. It's like, no, there's a lot more to it.
I think there's a danger to not to take away from the personal experiences of any particular developers either, but like with all things that are sort of manipulative and kind of harmfully, I think the term gaslighting here is really appropriate. Yeah. You can work in an environment, I say as someone who has been through this, where the crunching and the overtime, and this was from a IT perspective, so kind of adjacent but not directly dev, where I believed that my crunching was for the good of the company and it was a good thing and that it was just the way it was. So I think there can be a danger where when you are inside of that environment where you kind of justify it. And it's not that I was necessarily concerned about that with your article, because I think you're a very like analytical person, but I think what your article does that is very strong is it's presenting a lot of objective truths without doing that thing, without like saying, here's my perspective as a developer, but then also stating a bunch of stuff that's very arguable from the outside. That's kind of like, I don't want to tell you what's best for you, but you've also kind of been manipulated into thinking this is okay, which is what happened to me. And I didn't really understand it until I was no longer in that industry and in that space. And it's not even because the people that were at the top of that particular company were bad people. I think genuinely that they're good people, but it's just because of the systems in place and because of the realities of, broadly capitalism, but directly a lot of these industries, good people are led to build sort of a toxic culture around overwork without really realizing what they're doing. And then everyone's suddenly all in on it without getting it. And I think Jeff had thoughts too, and is making a face that is like, ooh.
No, go for it, please.
Yeah, so so this is everything how people are sort of conceiving of this. It tracks a lot of the stuff that we talk about in political philosophy quite a bit. So first point, everyone should go read Alex's article. And I say this as a person who analyzes arguments for a living. It's a really cogent article that gets at the core of things, especially with crunch culture, really well. So everyone should go read that. Two, precarity, which is what I heard Allison talking about as a condition and a consequence of capitalistic mechanisms and procedures. There's something about precarity, which, especially manufactured precarity, that changes people. It changes workplaces, it changes environments, it changes the way that we demand and we think, especially when we're in a precarious position. As a person who is currently in a precarious position, because I'm in academia, and the culture, there's many parallels between game development and academia, where they feed on your passion, like vampires. Anyway. So there's the precarity condition where, just to be clear, precarity refers to the state of being where you're on the edge of something drastic, something horrible happening, something. It's where a lot of Americans are. It's where a lot of people all over the world are. Where you're one paycheck away from just completely being homeless. That's precarity, and capitalism, and in addition to neoliberalism, has this way of going about things. The thing that Pat was talking about in his 3 is kind of interesting too, because it means like, okay, there is a thing that actually mentioned by Michel Foucault, where we kind of know it as, the panopticon and what have you, and think about jails. But the thing is that the really insidious thing about surveillance, jail, carceral culture, and capitalist culture, when they all start to dovetail, is precisely what Pat just described, which is your boss doesn't have to supervise you and surveil you. They will. They probably feel like they need to exercise that power, but most of the time they don't have to, because you do it to yourself.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's part of the whole deal. I mean, Althusser even talks about this with interpolation, where imagine a cop or a boss saying, hey, come here. You are no longer the self that you are at home. You're no longer the self that you are when you're a child or when you're with friends. You are suddenly, I'm an employee, or I'm a criminal.
Yeah. The thing is, like,
it changes.
You're totally right. Like, and speaking with academia versus software development, like something I've seen personally and from stories I've heard from friends as well, is like people who spend all night in the office so they can, sleep in the office, wake up and be there in the morning, so that they can continue. I have had friends who have worked at EA, and like a couple of them basically rented a trailer, like an RV trailer kind of thing, that they basically like parked in the parking lot of the office so they could be closer to the workplace. And it wasn't one person who did that. It was because it was a collective unit. Like it became normalized for them. They're like, yeah, multiple people are doing this. Totally. Let's do this. Let's be excited about it. Let's do this. And they don't realize how toxic that is to themselves. Like it's right. It's not necessarily a lack of self-respect. It's potentially a lack of foresight and critical thinking, which like I've been there, especially in academia. There, I've spent many nights, 100% like staying up all night doing stuff just because of momentum kind of stuff, but like not being like, okay, I should take a break and rest. Just because like my roommate was doing it at the same time. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is normal. Let's do this. So.
Well, and the part of the problem with that, and this is true of artistic pursuits, it's true of a lot of, it's true of, whether you're a developer, if you're working on medical software, if you're in academia, it's true. It was true in my experience. What it was is I was working in an IT environment, getting kids hardware and software infrastructure and network infrastructure for learning. And I came to care about it. I was really passionate about that because I felt like we were doing good. And I think that we did do good too. I don't think it was just, I don't think that was nothing. And the people that I worked with, nobody at that company was making $1 million. The people at the very top of the company had pretty reasonable salaries. Like it was generally and genuinely a pretty good, a collection of good people trying to do good work and also pay their rent. The problem is just that because of the system that we operated in, it wasn't sustainable in a way that allowed everyone to have a meaningful life. And the scariest thing, to your point, Jeff, about the change from, being yourself at home to being an employee, is during that time, I had one mode. There was no, I didn't come home and change. I still had free time and I still did things with my free time, but most of my free time was spent with the people that I worked with, who I still think of as very close friends. Like several of them I keep in touch with and really adore. And it was very much like we would get done working someplace at 10 o'clock, go to the bar for an hour or two, and there was no difference. I might code switch a bit if I was talking to clients instead of coworkers, but when it was just us coworkers, I mean, there was no like differentiation between my home life and my work life. And I don't think until you're forced out of that, the way that I was forced out of it was by deciding I wanted to move across the country. So I had to get a different job. And my new job is a much healthier place in a lot of ways to work. And I suddenly was working with people who found certain things less professional or whatever, which was a roundabout way of making me go like, oh, when I'm at work, I kind of need to tone these things down a little bit and definitely code switch for the workday. And that also helped me to redevelop the, like, this is me at work, this is me at home when I'm not working. But it's hard. It's a challenging thing to break. So it's certainly not meant as criticism, but I think that sometimes when you see, going back to sort of the pushback against reporting about labor issues in games, sometimes you see people sort of, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, but I don't want to go super long, coming to the defense of developers for a just reason. But it's also like, no, you really need to understand holistically what's happening here. Mm-hmm. Yes, the developers are saying this, but it may not be from a place of full understanding of the situation that they've kind of been manipulated to be in. And it's not their fault. It's
and
also, against them, but
also, I feel like a lot of the times, like one of the justifications I see a lot is, oh, well, they chose to do this. Like they always chose to do the crunch. And like at my old job, like there were certain periods of time where I worked like a lot of overtime, and I was working in the office until like 9, and I was miserable. But, you know, nobody ever told me to do that. It was just like the reality of, okay, I need to get this work done somehow. Therefore, you know, it ended up that way because I was like, well, you know, if I don't do the work, who's going to do the work? I felt guilty about pushing it onto anybody else. So it was just like, there's like a lot of factors here that aren't just some, you know, manager twirling their mustache going, you must work here for a 16-hour day. Like that's not the reality of how it works. And that's what I think is really valuable about Alex's article, is just like, we need to acknowledge the reality while also, you know, saying, hey, maybe we could do something differently.
To your point, Allison, and it doesn't always just have to be, I want to get this done. Sometimes it's a case of you're the only one who knows how to do it. Like it's the kind of thing where if you were hit by a bus, someone else wouldn't necessarily know how to pick up where you left off because you have all that context in your head. And
I mean, when I got laid off, I specifically sat that day. Like I feel like in hindsight, I wish I would have just kind of been like, okay, bye, when I got laid off. But that day,
that's what I do.
But you get into that headspace where I was like, oh, well, I need to train some people up on this one thing, and otherwise it won't get done. And I'm like, you know, why did I care that much? Because I was like justifiably like not happy with the situation about getting laid off, but I still was like, well, like you like become not necessarily, you know, feeling bad about the company, but be feeling bad about coworkers and about everything else. And you're just like, so I worked like for several more hours that day after I got laid off because I was like, well, I need to train people up on these things that only I know how to do. And it's like, that shouldn't be my problem, but
it's kind of an imbued sense of responsibility that you're just like, I've got to handle this because no one else can at this point. And
nobody else knows the realities of this client, and I'm the only one. And so like I offered to train people before, but it shouldn't be my problem. But at the same time, like
part of that's like empathy for other people too. You're like, I don't want someone else to suffer through like this nightmare that I can help them avoid.
Right. But I just feel like a lot of, you know, ways that you get kind of stuck in that mindset where you're like,
100%.
I have to do this for this company, when you're like, really, you don't.
No. One thing we've mentioned a few times is that like the way that the industry writes about the crunch is like not like addressing the problem. And I think like when they report on it, when like a Jason Schreier or, you know, someone at Waypoint or Kotaku, wherever is reporting on this, they're all guilty of it too. Like the people writing about it, they do the same thing. They crunch, they work long hours, they justify this stuff, whether that's because, you know, oh, well, I have to hit this embargo, or the story, you know, I really like the story. And, you know, part of that, I think it's important. They didn't get the game until, you know, 3 days before the embargo's up, and it's a 40-hour game or whatever.
Yeah. Or think of like that. Think of the classic Jeff Gersman story of getting Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time on like a Friday, playing it literally like 24 hours for 3 days, and then having a review up on the Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
It's also challenging because like if you look at a company like Bloomberg, which, I mean, I'm not attacking Schreier for this, but Bloomberg has had numerous labor issues across the spectrum of
Vice
overwork, and Vice has as well, overwork and harassment and all this stuff. So it's certainly, to some extent, the reporting can feel a little bit like stones cast from a glass house. But that also doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it and report on that. So
it 100% should be talked about in the reporting. But I think it's easy to, like, if you're in the exact same situation, it's hard to do that self-reflection and realize, oh, this is what's happening, because it's happening to you too. And maybe you start to like justify the way it's happening to
I would
people.
say, like, part of it's because I'm a fanboy, so it's hard for me to be totally impartial, but like at least like some places like Waypoint talks about, not every time, but a lot of times they'll bring up like, hey, we overwork sometimes too. And they try to do things to fight against it. Like, you know, Patrick Klepek didn't finish Amnesia Rebirth before the embargo date, etc. So there are some places that are trying to do the work to be better, but even it's hard. It's such a nuanced subject that, you know, Alex, you wrote a 4,000 word article about it, right? Like, it's hard. We've spent 40 minutes talking about it. It's hard to like unpack all of the nuance in that conversation, really, in any medium, because it is so multi-headed that you can go down. I mean, the thing I think about when I think of this is like, the image I've had in my head is, you know, those pin things you put your hands in and it makes the like 3D image of your hand on the other side. Sure. That's what this problem is like. And every single one of those pins is another aspect of it that in and of itself, you could probably devote hundreds of hours of trying to determine how to solve that problem. So it's, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to solve it. I'm not being defeatist here, but it certainly is a hard problem to solve.
But I think that we need to acknowledge that it's more complicated than just saying don't crunch. Like,
it's more complicated than saying, oh, if we delay it 6 months, that fixes the problem.
Right. And I think that we need to acknowledge that it's not necessarily just like, you know, that maniacal evil company going, ha ha ha. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, like, again, look at Route 59, the makers of Necrobarista. There was no evil there, and they had burnout, and they had their own crunch by self-imposed passion, basically, like, because they wanted to make the best thing they possibly could, but ended up in kind of the same place. So, like, it's multifaceted. There's not one catalyst. There's not one answer. It's we need to be more introspective and more critical and more objective and start taking things seriously. Yeah. So that's about it. Anyways, Cyberpunk 2077 got delayed to December.
If there's one thing that I want, like, people should take away from this, like, other than, hey, crunch is a complex subject and go read Alex's article, it's, hey, take care of yourself and like recognize when you're working too hard and, like, you know, allow yourself time to relax. That is one thing I've worked, like, I try to maintain for myself a lot, is just like, I can disengage. I'm going to leave on time every day from my job. I'm not going to think about work. Basically, when I get home, I'm not going to do anything extra for work, even if I have to, probably.
And I think also
some people don't have that luxury, but as much as you can, you know, do what you can. And also
don't feel guilty about taking care of yourself. I think that's the biggest thing that, like, I've had to personally deal with, is just that feeling of like, I could be working harder or I could be doing more. Whereas it's like, maybe you technically could, but it's not worth your health. It's not worth your mental health.
So it's also important to keep in mind, and then I'll shut up, but everyone has different thresholds.
Right,
for what
exactly.
that limit is, and you need to be respectful of the people around you's thresholds and understand them as well as your own. And you shouldn't, your worth is not determined by your labor and your, like, your cap for how much labor and productivity you can produce. So
I have one last thought, and it's kind of unrelated to the games industry and anything we've actually been talking about, but it is still wholly relevant to the conversation. And I feel as though everyone in the world almost at this point can maybe at least start to contextualize what this feeling is like for developers, because the majority of us are forced to work from home right now. Students are forced to take classes at home. Teachers are forced to teach from home. Programmers are forced to work from home 100%. You know, like, everybody is at home, and it's so incredibly difficult to separate your life from your work, which is nice when you're going to an office or a school or drive-through that you're operating the microphone at, whatever. Like once you leave that building, you can turn that part of your brain off and you can return to your comfy space. You can have your separate computer, your television, your kitchen, like, you know, all of that is your home and you're not thinking about work there. But now this has all been invited into our homes. The same place we're relaxing is the same place we're spending 8 to 10 hours a day doing work. And it's a really difficult thing because we do need to learn how to separate our concerns. We do need to say, okay, once it has reached this hour, I'm done. But like a lot of us don't. Like we say, oh, I could just, you know, I can get back to this. I can finish it later. Right. And like,
or I can check my email on my phone while I watch a movie or something.
Exactly.
And you're like, yeah.
Like a lot of us have Slack on our phones, like, because that way we're able to check it when we're doing other things. Cause like, that's something we've been conditioned to do. We have our work email on our phones, like our personal phones that we take with us when we go to watch a movie or whatever. Well, not this year, but point being, like it's difficult to find work-life balance when your work has entered your life, like to be blunt. And it's the same for development. It's the same for all of us. And we just need to figure out ways to have self-respect. Like that's basically it.
Yeah. And I mean, my personal way was always to like leave work at the office. And so, like now that, like when I was working from home, like that wasn't a thing that I had to constantly kind of fight I could check my laptop and just check my email or just check on my phone it's hard. It's hard because especially if a lot of us have the kind of working in an office mindset, you need a whole different skill, like set of skills and set of boundaries to yourself. So,
and it sucks when you're passionate because then you're just like, oh man, wait, it's 9 p.m. I could do this really fast. Oh, anyways, whatever. we can move on. We've been here for a long time.
Take care of yourselves, people. Like, just take care of yourselves.
Don't do what Donnie don't here does.
Let's see. Well, speaking of, we're long today. I don't know. We're gonna hit these next news stories real quick.
Yeah, you should just go on. No room for
we'll rapid fire it.
Yeah, just
if anyone has any strong feelings, speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, just
Far Cry 6 has been delayed until after March 2021, and also Rainbow Six Quarantine delayed to sometime before April 2022. Okay. So, hey, crunch. Spider-Man Miles Morales had a new suit revealed, inspired
fucking
by
rad.
Looks sick as fuck.
Into the Spider-Verse, and it is the Miles Morales suit from that movie, and they animated it to look like it's from the movie because that movie has some crazy animations. You should look it up on how they animated Into the Spider-Verse.
It is amazing. Like
it's got like the movie frame rate, but only on his character model. It's great.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Spider-Verse in general is just like amazing. Let's be honest.
Yes, it's the best Spider-Man.
Absolutely,
1000%.
As someone who doesn't like comic book movies, 100%.
I still think about like sometimes, occasionally something will pop up on Twitter where it's like, here's how I made the music to Spider-Verse, and I'm like, all of you were so talented.
I've watched that movie a lot of times. It's probably the Spider-Man movie I've watched the most too.
Man, it's so good, and that suit looks amazing, and I'm excited to play that game.
Halo Infinite's director Chris Lee has left the project, and they are the second director to leave the project.
That game might never come out.
That thing is a nightmare project.
Halo Infinite will be in development forever.
Infinite development.
Yep, Halo Infinite development.
Just call it Doomed Eternal because it's in development hell.
Oh wow! You know what they should do?
Also,
they should release that game and then iterate on it. That's what they should do.
That's what they're gonna do. But yeah,
put it in early access.
It's supposed to be like the Halo for like.
Yeah, they got to put out some other big first party stuff first, so that's not the thing. Otherwise, it looks real bad for the Series X launch.
Let's see. Speaking of Series X and Microsoft, Everwild creative director Simon Woodruff also left Rare, though it doesn't seem like he's shipped a game in a long time. He worked on a lot of stuff at Sega, like Sonic Generations or something.
Oh.
And like he's been in the industry a long time, but it doesn't seem like he's shipped anything like recently. So I'm not even sure what's up there. I don't know. There weren't any major details on what's going on there. Next story. Hackers jailbroke the Oculus Quest 2, bypassing the need for a Facebook login,
Hell yeah.
which
I think
that's a
you
whole
should
thing.
wait until we see what happens with PSVR for the next gen before buying.
Well,
VR
they
headsets.
Jim Ryan, that's his name,
Yep.
did an interview with the Washington Post where he said new PSVR is not happening next year or probably the year after that. So
He also said that there would not be PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 cross-gen games. So that guy lies all the fucking time.
that's true.
I bet you will see it announced next year.
Maybe.
I just
We'll
mean
see.
wait and see what it is first before you invest
Yeah.
in VR hardware.
Yeah.
I wonder if Facebook/Oculus are going to do the Switch thing and fix it with a hardware update with some like
I bet
their
they
next
will. Yeah.
release.
I suspect this won't last. This hack won't last.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sony. Speaking of Sony, pushed a series of Sony pushed a series of patches to PS4 games, which reduced loading times. I did not see this story myself.
Yeah.
What games?
Like The Last of Us. What were some other ones? Like Bloodborne? No, not Bloodborne. Was it?
Probably Ghost of Tsushima, but that had a big patch because it had like
It already
the
had great load times too
multiplayer
for
mode. Yeah,
that game
Yeah.
being what it is.
Yeah.
God of
yeah.
War probably. I don't know.
Like
we
they were.
believe in generations.
Yeah. Like it was kind of insane how much it was like improving. Like it was a significant improvement. Stuff that was like taking a minute. Like here, The Last of Us remastered. They used to have loading times that were over a minute, and now they are 14 seconds.
If you optimize your file size and like
Yeah.
there's a lot of optimization you can do to load times if you know what the hard drive looks like.
Somebody tell Activision, because holy shit, those Call of Duty files.
Yeah,
Cold War's
but,
gonna be
like-
250 gigabytes.
Yeah,
That's if you
ridiculous.
have like the full 4K texture stuff.
Yeah, you're right. It's only 220 or 225 gigabytes if you don't.
It's like 175, I thought.
Yeah.
But
Andre,
yeah.
That's just the
Andre-
campaign.
Andre, one which might interest you is Until Dawn on PS4 now doesn't have load times.
Wow.
Yeah.
That-
Like,
wow.
Yeah.
yeah, so it's insane.
Okay, that's actually really cool. Maybe I'll go replay Until Dawn. That'll okay. Next, a new entry in the Steins Gate series was announced.
Hell
It's
yeah.
not been titled, and there are basically no details.
Yep. No, they've talked about the fact that like it is not necessarily a sequel, it's not necessarily a prequel, but it's in the same series.
Okay.
Looking forward to whatever that is.
It's a squeakquel.
Yes, exactly.
Steins Gate the squeakquel.
Get Alvin Olive
yes.
in here.
Alvin.
What's the guy's name? Dave?
Yep.
Yeah, Dave.
Yeah.
Speaking of Alvin, Dave, and a name that starts with an M, that is related to chipmunks.
Michelangelo.
Alvin, Michelangelo, and Dave announced
Put
the
out
new
their
Radeon GPUs.
Their new GPUs. In the crossover event of the
AMD
year.
finally came out swinging against NVIDIA's GPUs and revealed the 6800, the Radeon 6800, the 6800 XT, and the 6900.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. They're actually pretty great, which is surprising. Like, Radeon cards have not been particularly excellent. Like, they've been fine. Like, they've been decent. They've been the value option. Like, they're the ones you get that are a little cheaper, and they do their job. They're fine. They're okay, but the drivers are historically really fucking terrible. Like, to the point where it's like almost bricking people's PCs. Like, not to the extent, I'm not saying they're bricking people's PCs, but like they became.
But you're saying sometimes they're bricking people's PCs.
Yeah.
They may as well until the next like
Yeah, I
driver
got you.
comes out.
I have friends who I have in multiple different groups of friends who have built PCs recently, and they were like, I'm gonna get the AMD option is a little cheaper and they're better anyway. And I was like, okay, you keep telling yourself that. And then they got them and then had a nightmare trying to get certain games to work because they're like, the drivers suck, it turns out.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I told you this.
Yeah. But
you didn't
it
listen
looks,
to me.
But it looks like this time they're actually bringing the fire. Like they're bringing the heat. They look really good. And not as in
rage mode.
Yeah, rage mode is dumb. It's basically like an overdrive button that makes it go a little bit faster.
1%.
Like 1%
On the
difference.
card itself?
No.
No, it's like a software thing.
I want it
like-
on
like-
the card.
Yeah, that'd be
Well,
sweet. You have to
it's in-
reach into your case and just
Fuck yeah.
poke your card.
You could build a custom
Rage
case
128.
that has a
The problem is it only
Yeah.
works in Rage 2.
Or the Avengers. But they seem good. There's a lot more to talk about, but we don't have to right now. They seem good. And it's the first time the
they've got
GPU space has had competition in a long time.
And they're like actually competing against like the high end stuff. Usually they're like mid to low end competitors.
Yeah, like they would be like their highest end would be competing against like the 70 series, like the 1070, 2070, 3070. But this one, like they're actually right up there against the 3080 and 3090. So
yeah, and
it's
cheaper.
pretty cool.
And for those
and
cards, at least.
significantly cheaper. Like their 3090 equivalent is $1,000 US. The 3090 is $1,500 US. So like it's a big difference.
But we'll see if it's any good in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But with that, I think we can finally wrap up. We lost. Oh wait, okay, no, I just made my window small. That's what happened here. Okay, I was like, we lost Allison and Pat, but no, I just shrunk my window down.
Oh, I'm here, baby.
I'm still here.
Despite everything, I'm still here. I'm still here.
Dog is asleep.
Despite all this rage mode, I'm still just a rat in a cage.
A squeakquel.
Indeed.
Jeff put this in the chat. Teenage Mutant Ninja Alvin.
Oh my god.
Oh god.
Alvin.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Alvin.
Welcome.
Thank you for that.
I yelled when I was
Neil
working.
Cistriega can have that one for free.
When I was working in food service, there was a guy named Alvin came through, and we had to like yell out people's names for their order. And
Oh
so
god.
I looked at my supervisors like, I'm just gonna like yell Alvin, like Alvin and the Chipmunks, and she's like, okay. I did it, and everyone in the venue just turned and stared at me. Then he came back like 2 weeks later, and he's like, "You can do it." He was looking. I looked down and I saw his name, and I looked up, and we made eye contact. He's like, "Do it."
Okay, that's good. Because I think
Do
if
it.
your name's Alvin, you've heard that way too much. But if he's like on board, then that's good.
The way you said "do it" just made me think of the horse from.
Oh yeah,
Metal
no, he
Gear.
said it just like Kiefer Sutherland in Metal Gear. Do it.
I was thinking more
That
Palpatine. Listen.
That works too.
do it.
it.
Execute order, Alvin.
God.
This is where we are today.
Yeah, it's been a
Oh
long.
yeah, this
Hey.
is
It's been
like
a good morning.
This has been a long podcast, and I'm just like, yeah.
That has been episode 145 of the Gaming Fix podcast on October 31st, 2020. I've been your host, Andre Cole, aka your partner's favorite ghoul. You can find the podcast on Twitter at at Fix Podcast. Oh God, it's late. I lost it.
Oh no.
At Fix Podcast on Twitter, at fix.space, where you can read Alex's excellent article, or you can go over to podchaser.com/gamingfix, leave us a review. It'd be very much appreciated. And I think that's everything for the podcast stuff. You can find me, Andre Cole, on Twitter at Coolslaw, COOLSL4W. Pat, where can people find you?
Find me at PJC Plays, and you can find me flying airplanes next Saturday for 24 hours
Yay!
around
Oh, yeah.
the world. Should be
I'm so
interesting.
excited.
It's going to be especially interesting trying to manage that with the whole dog situation. So I'm excited to find a solution for that.
Those planes, they fly themselves.
They do kind of these days. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
We'll try
there'll
and
be details on how you can get in on that from the donation perspective if you have the means to donate, but also just want people to come and hang out and share that we're doing it.
and maybe we'll get some other like stuff going in on the side.
Yes,
We
that'd
do,
be great.
like, get some Among Us going, or
Yeah, I'll be streaming to the fixed channel, but there's going to be plenty of long periods of time where we can switch over to another game. And
turns out trans-Pacific, transatlantic flights really long.
yeah, and we're probably going to have
it.
to use a little bit of time dilation to get it all to work, but that doesn't mean that it'll be fun to watch the ocean zip by.
Allison, where can people find you?
Me on Twitter at WRITERSERENYTY.
Jeff?
You can find me on Twitter at Stranger Peace. That's PEACE, where you can see all of my word vomit.
Yum. Word vomit. Yum.
Wow.
Okay.
And Alex, where can people find you?
I'm still thinking about gourds. I didn't know that zucchini was a gourd.
Is it? Huh? Okay.
Yeah, I read something about how like pumpkins in certain parts of Asia are like just mean gourd. So like,
Yep.
basically, if you say, "Are you carving pumpkins?" It's like, "Are you carving any gourd?" So you get like, I don't know. That's
In Japan, they don't, like, old people, they didn't have a word for green, so they just say blue. So
Yeah.
like the light's blue. And they just, yeah.
wow.
I love it.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Or like if you're talking
fascinating.
about it like a banana, it's like, oh, it's too blue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Like they had a word for green, but they just said it was blue. I don't.
It's an inherently colorblind culture.
But only for green. Anyway, that's going to do
Anyways.
it. Thanks for joining us on
Thanks
this
for
very special podcast.
Thanks for joining, Jeff. As always, we always appreciate it.
Yay, thank you, Jeff.
And thank you, Jeff, for the excellent. Yes, thank you for the excellent theme. We love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure our listeners love it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I'm just glad people enjoy it.
Look up the GIF of Cat Jam, and that's what they're doing every time we start the podcast.
Aww.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, y'all.
Bye.
All right, stream. It's just you and me.